1 will be cancelled. Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 22nd of April. Today, Raab's retribution. Oliver Dowden and Alex Chalk have come in to take over, but will Mr. Raab have his revenge on the civil service? Ukraine will join the NATO family, but when the war is over. But is that really just a red rag to the Russian bear?
Are petrol pump problems on the horizon? The price of fuel jumped up yesterday for the first time in 6 months. And signed, sealed, delivered. Royal Mail rubber stamps a deal to end the postal strikes.
Very good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Well, do you know, should we get in with some nitty-gritty this morning?
The nitty-gritty.
Jailing people. Because there's these huge Extinction Rebellion protests going on in London and things at the minute. Just Stop Oil protesters who climbed the Dartford crossing. Very dangerous thing to do. Anyway, they got taken to court, didn't they? They were sentenced. But they've been given 5 years in jail. Now, my question is that really fair? Is 5 years a bit extreme? They presumably will serve 2.5 of that. That's a long time, isn't it, for sort of public disorder and that sort of thing?
Well, it's public nuisance, isn't it? So Just Stop Oil have said this is the longest sentence for a peaceful protest ever in this country. But if there's anything you do today, I do think it's quite interesting. The judge's comments for this sentencing are really, really interesting. He's basically saying he thinks they should have known better, and basically he wants to stop copycat actions, and that's why the sentence is so long, and he even admits it's long. It's because he thinks, well, if this is what you're willing to do now, you get away with it, what are people willing to do in the future? So you see what he's trying to do.
You have to be punished for the chaos you caused and to deter others from copying you. Is it meant to be... Is prison term meant to be a deterrent in that sense? Get longer than perhaps you should just to deter others from doing it. I don't know. I'm all for justice, and I think they've caused a lot of problems and put lives at risk. I mean, namely their own. 5 years is a long time, though, for something like that.
But the judge makes the point, I mean, the comments here, it garnered media attention because of its scale and novelty. Well, what will the next novel protest be? If novel is massive disruption to the public, traction of that link needs to be broken. He's got a point, hasn't he? I mean, we're talking about it now. It did garner media attention.
Oh, yeah.
And if people are watching thinking, well, this is how you get your cause on the big screen or on the front of the newspapers, maybe we should be doing the same sort of thing.
Maybe so, but then you get stuff like, burglary, some rape and all the rest of it, and sexual assaults and serious crimes, physical abuse, which are only getting that sort of length, sometimes less.
Yeah.
So that's how you balance,
Is it fair? Is it right?
know.
I mean, Just Stop Oil would say it was a peaceful process. It was dangerous, but nobody got hurt. I mean, the most that happened was the QE2 bridge was shut for some time. and they are now cumulatively serving 5 years. So it's two people serving 5 years. I think it's about 3 years for one person and 2 years, 7 months for the other. Let us know what you make of that. We know you're going to have an opinion on this story. gbnews@gbnews.uk. Is it a sign of things to come? I mean, we saw the snooker table disruption, didn't we, last week?
Yeah, and mind you, is that bad? I mean, I know it's
Is that
irritating.
Scaling a gantry on the QE2 bridge?
I don't know, just be interesting to get your thoughts on that this morning. Tough on crime and all that sort of thing, or do you let some of it slide? Don't know. Anyway, talking about getting tough, Dominic Raab, former Deputy Prime Minister, has warned that we, the public, will pay the price after he claims he was forced to resign. So, was he rightly sent packing?
Well, Mr Raab claims he was driven from office by activist, passive-aggressive civil servants. But this is despite the report into his conduct concluding that he acted in an intimidating way with persistently aggressive conduct.
Well, our political reporter Olivia Utley sat down with Mr Raab just after his resignation.
So thank you so much, Mr Raab, for coming to talk to us today. And of course, it's been quite a day for all of us, and most particularly you. Can I first ask, how do you define a bully?
I don't think it is for me to define it, but look, I'm very confident that I didn't behave in a bullying way. Most of these allegations were dismissed out of hand. And I think people watching this will be surprised that in scrutinising civil servants, in making sure that millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is not squandered, being able to pull very senior civil servants, not junior members of staff, up and say, look, I don't have the basic information to decide this. That was one of the things on which I was found to have been bullying because I defended someone, or because I said in relation to human rights reform, to get more foreign national offenders removed from this country, to strengthen free speech, I said I thought the department were being obstructive. If these kind of things amount to bullying, then I think it puts a handbrake, a paralysing effect on ministers delivering for the British people, and that can't be right.
Do you think, essentially, that the allegations were purely political, or do you think people genuinely felt threatened by you?
That's difficult to say, but the way my behaviour was characterised is interesting. Adam Toddie KC, very experienced barrister who conducted this investigation, found I'd never lost my temper, never over 4.5 years shouted or swore at anyone, but that some people found my direct style of probing, of interrogating, of scrutiny unsettling or discomforting or even offensive. And I think there's a certain tyranny of subjective hurt feelings here, which if you actually apply that across the board, means that senior ministers are at risk as they try and drive forward the change that the British public expect, try and protect taxpayers' money, try and deliver for the British people, can actually hold things back. I think if you look at that across the board, and particularly if you compare it to other walks of life, stressful jobs, high-powered businesses, but other walks of life more generally, I think people would be pretty surprised. The risk, of course, is that it leads government, ministers, politicians to look and feel to the public even more detached from reality.
You talk about a tyranny of hurt feelings, but do you think it might go even further than that? Do you think that perhaps civil servants coordinated a campaign to remove you, a political campaign?
Well, there was certainly some coordination. One of the complaints was struck out because they'd written it together. Look, put it this way. These claims, some of them were 4.5 years old. Another one was 2.5 years old. The vast majority were 8 months old. They were all submitted on the same day, which is 15th of November. I think a few came just a little bit later. That can't be coincidental. But I only know what I know. And I also know that I was warned by a very senior member of the government, a senior civil servant, that there are increasingly activist civil servants mobilised by the FDA union who are looking to target ministers. But all I know is that I think the bar has been so lowered now that the government we've got, and I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Prime Minister, is going to struggle to drive forward the changes we need. There'll be a chilling effect, a paralysing effect on ministers. I'm already, my phone is lit up by ministers now very concerned that they could be accused of these things for behaviour that in most walks of life would be regarded as important managerial scrutiny. And I think that must be wrong.
Well, let's get some reaction now with the local government editor of Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs. Good morning to you, Harry. Really good to have you with us. I mean, it's quite striking, isn't it, reading that resignation letter and listening to Mr Raab talking to our reporter Olivia Utley. There is no apology, is there? And there's not really an accepting of the report's findings either. It is this sense that he was forced down. I mean, he goes on to say that findings are flawed and it sets a dangerous precedent. Those are his words. What do you make of all of this?
I think it's an unusual situation where a resignation has actually enhanced a politician's reputation. I thought that the interview with Olivia Utley was fascinating. And I used to work in various newspaper offices through the sort of 1990s, where there was lots of shouting and swearing and quite robust criticism if I made a mistake or anybody else did. I didn't actually think even of that of bullying, because it wasn't that I felt that I or anyone else was being picked on unfairly. But we now understand that there wasn't even that Dominic Raab was adopting that tone. There was this amusing allegation about him getting into a rage and picking up some salad, from Pret, picking up the tomatoes and throwing them at people. It turned out that was just invented. He never swore at anybody. He never shouted at anybody. He never threw anything at anybody. All he did was to criticise if a civil servant hadn't produced their work on time, or if he felt that a civil servant was trying to prevent him carrying out the policies that he, as the elected politician, was wanting to do. So I think there are a couple of things, aren't there? One is the snowflake thing of people saying that they, regard themselves as being bullied, however mild criticism is. And there's the other point about, who should actually decide what policy is. Should it be the elected government, or should it be, what they call the blob, the quangocrats and so on? And I think he's raised both those concerns in a very justified manner.
Is there a real danger then that we, the public, will suffer, that in fact no politician is going to be able to, or no minister is going to be able to robustly defend what they want and how they want a department to be run?
Well, that would seem to be the case, wouldn't it? In a way, the irony of all this is that I would regard bullying as a group of people getting together and targeting an individual. And in that sense, Dominic Raab's been the victim of bullying. They weren't even particularly subtle on it, as he said in that interview with Olivia Utley, all sending in their complaints on the same day. And he's obviously dealt with a large number of civil servants, and he also said that the great majority of them he found professional and he got on fine with. So it does then seem that it's a politically motivated, coordinated attack. He was set up, and then if that succeeds, then that is damaging, and anybody who believes in democracy should be concerned about that, because if you disagree with the policies of the government, the opportunity there is to vote them out. But you can't have a situation in a democracy where the elected government isn't able to pursue the policies that it chooses.
He has made quite serious allegations against civil servants, though, hasn't he? The FTA union, who represents civil servants, has called it dangerous conspiracy theories that undermine the impartiality and integrity of the civil service. What do you make of that? Have they got a point?
I don't think so at all. No, I think it's reading the report, a large number of these allegations were against Dominic Raab were dismissed. But if they're putting in, if lots of different people are all putting in their complaints on the same day, that was the fact. And because of conspiracy theory, and there obviously was a conspiracy. They obviously were, a coordinated attempt to get him. And inevitably, of course, when it's a high profile in the media, that would also encourage people to put in politically motivated complaints. So I think it is worrying, but absolutely in terms of our interests as taxpayers, if you've got projects that are costing millions of pounds of taxpayers' money, then absolutely these civil servants need to be held to a high standard. And of course, when he's the Justice Secretary, he's trying to bring in policies to cut crime. He's trying to bring in policies to try and secure the borders so we don't get people coming into this country illegally and being able to stay. All these things are important to the public, and if the civil servants, either through being politically obstructive or just through idleness or incompetence of failing to deliver on that, he's absolutely, as the cabinet minister, had an obligation on behalf of the public to hold them to high standards. The criticism would have been if he'd just allowed it to slide.
Yeah, just briefly, Harry, I mean, what we're not talking about here is Adam Tolley, KC. Now, he was seen as a safe pair of hands to investigate this, and whether you agree with his conclusions or not, he has decided that bullying of some form or another, something which was not acceptable, has been carried out. Well, that carries weight, doesn't it?
Oh, it obviously does in the sense that that Raab then did resign. And I think that it would have been difficult under the circumstances for him to carry on. But no, it was fascinating reading the report, and I do think that it does represent a broader culture, that if we're going to define bullying as anybody who feels that they've been bullied, no matter how reasonable or mild or constructive the criticism, then I think that broader culture, particularly in the public sector, but I think elsewhere, is going to undermine our performance as a country. We do need to be rigorous. It's a very good point that these were senior civil servants, so he wasn't bullying, in terms of picking on junior people. These senior civil servants, and he was right to hold them to account.
OK, Harry Phibbs, really good to have you on the programme. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, I'm sure plenty of you will have a view on that. I don't know, I'm torn now.
I don't know, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, the report upheld some bullying allegations, so he was true to his word, wasn't he? He said if he was found guilty,
he would go.
That he had been a bully, then he would step down. That's what happened. But I think the resignation letter, we got that to show, very, very interesting, because there is no apology in this resignation letter. There's not even an accepting of the report's findings. It's very much, this process is flawed.
And as Harry said, what is fascinating is he's actually come out of this really well. Yeah, in a sort of stronger position. So, spell on the backbenches, then he'll be back. I mean, that's how these things work. So, I don't know, your thoughts on that, please. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Frank has been in touch. He said the civil service are working against the people's elected government and democratic vote to leave the EU. Ministers will disagree. Media will disagree, I beg your pardon, say it's bullying, even though most of the stories they've been releasing have been unfounded. So, I mean, I don't know if it's all based around the EU.
Well, that's certainly what...
Might be, but...
That's certainly what Dominic Raab was suggesting yesterday in some of his television interviews. He said that some of them were anti-Brexit, and this is what it's down to, it's trying to block policy. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. It's quite serious allegations, isn't it?
It is.
Undemocratic.
Well, let us know what you think this morning. Now, Ukraine's place is in NATO, not just being an ally.
But it can't join until the war is over. But the NATO Secretary-General said all members agreed on the move. Is
it a red rag to a bull as far as Russia is concerned? Let's talk to the defence editor from the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, good to see you this morning. I just wonder if announcing this now is actually a pretty bad move. Russia does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO. It's got, some might argue, some legitimate concerns about having NATO on its border. This is a push for them to keep going, isn't it?
It is a red rag to a not-so-very red bull these days in Russia, if I could put it like that, as it gets more imperialist under Mr. Putin and less communist. It's very interesting. It's Mr. Stoltenberg's legacy. He hasn't just done it off his own bat. He is reflecting the concerns of a lot of East European members of NATO, with one really big exception, which is Mr. Orban's Hungary. What he is saying, I think, in code, not a very subtle code, is that Ukraine is an ally of NATO, though it is not in NATO. And as you rightly suggest, it would take ages for, in the best possible circumstances, for Ukraine to join NATO. The state of the economy, the state of democracy there, it must be said. It is not prepared for it. Look, you know, it was like a white tornado, as it were, the way Finland got in, just like that. You know, you'd have to be Tommy Cooper, if you remember him, to say that. The next one that is really interesting, I don't want to divert that, is to whether Sweden gets in, whether Turkey is going to block him. But the message from Stoltenberg, from the big visit of NATO to Zelensky, is, come on, we are expecting the summer offensives on both sides. You're going to need to do more.
What will Ukraine be thinking of this? Because they've wanted this for a long time, haven't they? Really, since 2014. They've wanted this roadmap to NATO. And now we're being told it's going to happen after the war, and you can understand that, because NATO doesn't want to engage in a war with Russia. Will they be satisfied with this as that roadmap?
I think they'll be reasonably satisfied, but there's a sort of bad legacy here, because the first time it was mentioned that Ukraine and Georgia should join NATO, and NATO came out with a statement from a summit at Bucharest in April 2008. It led to a war with Georgia, between Russia and Georgia, within months. You know, so you're quite right to ask whether this would provoke Russia or not. I don't think it's going to change a fig there. Russia is going to be provoked whatever happens, and it's calculating the odds as to how to push the war. What I think Stoltenberg was doing, the Secretary-General, whether he goes on being Secretary-General or not, and he has been a very strong leader, is, come on, I want to keep this in the headlines. Because the speculation about the famous summer offensives has gone on and on and on. It's been very unrealistic, actually, because you can't do anything until the weather is really good and the ground is really hard. Because even fighting with 40-ton tanks, which is what they've been doing up to now, is relatively easy in softish ground. The ground has got to harden because it's got to take 60 to 70-ton tanks. Leopards, dare I say, even those 14 Challenger 2s, and the Americans are going to be sending tanks now. But I think this is not good news for the British government, because I think we're moving up to a series of summits and declarations by NATO, and the big summit is at Vilnius in the Baltics in July, and they're going to say, in no uncertain terms, you have got to do more. And the whole way, the whole thing has been set up. There was this so-called...
Who's got to do more?
They want more troops on the front line. And the trouble is that, I mean, I hate to say that in these terms of to what the minimum requirement, excellent in advice, excellent with technical stuff, but in actually managing forces and supporting NATO, some armies are better than others. And we, certainly, the UK, are not among the best at the moment.
We're talking about a summer offensive. I mean, if we can talk about the US intelligence leaks recently, it would suggest that Ukraine isn't equipped for a summer offensive.
Well, it's not equipped because, it is in aircraft and armour and tanks. But the real question for Ukraine is twofold. It's actually manpower, human power, if I could say that, personnel. And they've done very well up to now. But can it go on at this rate of bloodletting? It is equally a problem, though in different ways. It's recruiting and dysfunction on the personnel side for the Russians. But can it do that? And the other thing is, I don't know whether you've been looking at maps lately. They've been running on and off for the last few weeks of the light maps of Ukraine and Russia. The lights have gone out in Ukraine, and it's whether the economy, the infrastructure can be sustained for another few months and another year, possibly, of war.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Although Russia wanted this to be very fast, they actually have the capability to play the long game.
Well, they don't.
You don't think they do? Why not?
Well,
Why not?
Up to a point that I think things get problematic, certainly by this time next year, because it looks as if the economy is fraying, it's going backwards by gearing it to defence, and the defence economy is not working that well. They're not producing the guns, the ammunition that they can themselves. That's why they arrested, I suspect, the Wall Street Journal correspondent, because he was looking into all that. The problems with personnel, the problems with armament. So let's draw this to a close. It's all down to China in the end.
And they haven't got the lethal aid from China that they wanted as well to be a factor in this.
And China is going to do things, Mr. Putin must realise it, absolutely on China's terms. And China will want a dividend. It's not going to do, you know, solidarity, we're up against the West or whatever. They know what they're up against with the West, and they're far more concentrated on Taiwan, trade, and that kind of thing, and in their region, just to give a helping hand for the sake of it with Putin. They've been very cynical, by the way. They've been sending back all their rather old Soviet-style equipment, which was provided through armaments agreements from Russia. That's what they're getting, and they don't seem to have got anything much more so far.
OK. Robert, we've got to leave it there, but really fascinating to talk to you. Thank you.
It is fascinating.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Now, grim news, because next you may have to dig even deeper next time you fill up your car. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:27, good morning to you. This is Breakfast on GB News. Now, filling up the motor has felt a little less painful this year because the prices keep falling bit by bit. But that's all about to grind to a halt.
Yes, oil is getting more expensive, just like lots of things. So guess what? We're going to see a bump at petrol pump prices as a result.
But why is it then there is still, and this drives me absolutely insane, why is it there is still huge differences in prices across the country, even across your own town? Let's talk to Howard Cox from Fairfuel UK. Howard, good to see you this morning. What is that all about? Why is there such a difference in prices?
Well, it's good morning. It's a bit like Groundhog Day, isn't it? We're talking about it again and again and again. It's called profiteering. It's called racketeering all the way in the fuel supply chain. They can do it. They're unmonitored. They're unchecked. In other essential resources like water and electricity and gas, etc., we have consumer price watchdogs, but we don't have one for petrol and diesel. 37 million people depend on it, drivers across the country. Our commercial heartbeat depends on diesel. And the biggest scandal at the moment is the difference between diesel and petrol, because the cost of buying diesel for retailers is 5 to 6 pence cheaper per litre than petrol. And yet diesel is something like 15 to 20p more on average across the country. Go figure.
And diesel has been deliberately inflated, hasn't it, since the start of this year?
Absolutely right. And not only are the fuel supply chain benefiting, but the government are as well. Since the beginning of the year, we estimate that diesel drivers have paid something like £1.3 billion more for diesel than they needed to. And the government have allowed this to happen, and because they're enjoying something like £6 to £7 million a day of extra VAT and fuel duty. And they know it's in their hands to introduce a body like Pump Watch, which we've been calling for the last 3 years.
Yeah, so Pump Watch would make prices fairer for all of us. We'd sort of know what we were getting, sort of thing. But you're basically saying we're being fleeced, and deliberately fleeced.
Absolutely. We're being totally and utterly deliberately fleeced. There's no way the fuel supply chain is checked whatsoever. I monitor every single day wholesale prices and retail prices, and every day I get sickened by just how much drivers are fleeced. The interesting thing about this is, inflation came down by a few points to 10.1%. If we'd actually had diesel at the right price, something like we work out 17 pence less on average since the beginning of the year, we believe inflation will be below 9%. That's the sort of thing that the government have in their control. Why they're not doing it, we don't know. But obviously, the biggest reason they're not doing it is because they get a shed load of tax coming in because of the high prices at the pumps.
There's that phrase, isn't there, up like a rocket and falls down like a feather, and that's certainly the way it is with petrol prices, it seems. I mean, they have come down in recent months, but only by about 30 or 40p. And now, as we're talking about this morning, they're going to be halted completely.
Well, out of the 230 countries I monitor, we're still always in the top 5 in the cost of filling up. And there's no need for this at all because, as I said earlier, the commercial heartbeat, logistics, delivery, our internet economy absolutely survives and depends on diesel prices. And why is diesel so much higher than petrol? And the Competitions and Market Authority also seem to be quite happy to allow this to continue. This is true racketeering, profiteering, and it's got to stop.
But in terms of who could alter it immediately, then, and I know there are obviously issues on the government side of all this, but what about those, the petrol stations themselves or the owners of those stations? I mean, presumably, they could drop the price of diesel by 10p, 15p, that full 17p even, if you wanted. They could do that in a heartbeat, couldn't they?
Yes, but they're being held to very strong contracts with their fuel supply wholesalers. It's further up the fuel supply chain, the problem. There are some garages that seem to have some deal. There is one garage that is selling diesel for about $1.49 in the Midlands. Costco seems to be doing quite well. But the problem we do have is that supermarkets now, because they're much more looking at the bottom line and they're subject to the problems of the cost of living crisis or cost of buying food and stuff, they're not using petrol as diesel as sort of lost leaders, because that used to bring the prices down a lot more. And we're not seeing that sort of thing. The important thing is the government simply have to make pricing the pumps transparent, fair and honest. I'm all for a garage making decent living, decent profit. But when you see that now the average family diesel car is paying £10 more to fill up than they should be, the government should get on top of that, especially in a cost of living crisis.
I'll tell you what, Howard, I mean, you always sound enthusiastic, right? You know your stuff, and it always sounds like common sense. Are you fed up of banging your head against a brick wall? It doesn't seem like you're going to get anywhere, to be honest.
Yes, I don't know why I do it. My wife keeps saying, why the hell are you doing this? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going because it's wrong. Someone's got to keep doing this. And I do have the benefit of about 60 backbench MPs who really get behind me and support it. The problem we have is when they step over that line and get into government. Even Jeremy Hunt said to me 3 years ago, he backs Fair Fuel UK, he backs fighting for lower fuel duty, all those sorts of things. But suddenly when he gets into cabinet, they suddenly think he's even talking about putting fuel duty up next year in a general election year. Economic and electoral suicide.
No, it's very frustrating. Howard, as always, it's really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. And I bet all of you watching and listening are probably cheering Howard on.
Yeah.
This one, because it's not... We know the prices go up. Price of oil is going up, therefore it is going to hit us at the pumps. That's the very nature of it. However, let's do it fairly. And Pump Watch, which would make it all very transparent, and you sort of a bit more consistency across the country. I mean, why not? We have consistency with everything else.
Do we need an independent watchdog?
Yeah.
Lots of people would say something like Fairfield UK. We need something like that. I mean, prices have been deliberately inflated for months now. As we just heard there, they're going to be halted. So they were coming down, not anymore. Let us know what you make of that. How much is an average tank of fuel now?
Well, it depends how big your tank is, doesn't it? You see, mine has come down. It was topping out about 125, 130 quid. It's now down to less than £100.
That's not...
That's petrol.
Still a disgrace, though, isn't it? Almost £100 just to fill up a tank of fuel.
That's every week.
Yeah, every week. So it's a lot of money, isn't it? Let us know what you make of that. Do we need an independent watchdog? What do you make of pump prices not coming down? Latent profiteering, says Fairfield UK.
Sometimes you don't mind, you know, you just accept you have to pay more for things, right? But it's different when you feel like you're being ripped off.
Yeah. No one likes feeling like they're being ripped off.
That's the difference.
Do they?
Now, let's cheer ourselves up a little bit with the coronation, should we? Because have you noticed where you live, your post boxes getting a new, well, not coat of paint, but literally a new coat, a knitted one? Have a look at some of these pictures. This sort of thing. See if we can lose the strap there so we can see exactly what we've got. See, look at that. A nice topper. There's a crown on that one. Very nice indeed. There's the king and queen on that one. And people are just knitting. Now, they're knitting them out of acrylic wool so they don't rot.
Oh, that's clever, yes.
But they're beautiful little works of art and they're popping up all over the country. All these you can see on Twitter and... I mean, they're just very nice. It's very patriotic, I think.
I think it's very patriotic. I think it's a lovely trend that started popping up. It feels like such a community... Well, it's community spirit, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing for people to see. Oh, look at the little corgis on that one, tiny little knitted corgis.
Yeah.
I think that might be my favourite so far. Do you know what? I was in a supermarket yesterday and I saw the first Coronation biscuits and cakes. It is so lovely, just the gearing up. And you
Getting
can see
into the spirit of it.
in these post boxes.
Now, apparently the postmen tend to quite like them because you could just take them off, I suppose. But they're all being left on. It's all very nice. So if you've got any round you, take a picture, send them in. If you're one of those fabulous knitters, get in touch. Let us know why you do it. We might try and do like an item on the show tomorrow or next week or something if you want to get on and talk about it. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Get in touch with all of your postbox toppers. I really like them.
I really like them as well.
It's
and
nice.
maybe if you are an avid knitter, maybe we've inspired you to go and top your
Go and do one.
postbox. It'd be good, right?
But acrylic wool. There you go, is what you need. We were talking about, I asked you at the top of the show about those protesters. They scaled the Dartford Crossing Bridge, blooming big bridge, been jailed in total for about 5 years. Is it fair? This is pretty long sentences for that. Graham says, at last, 2 of the activists have been jailed. What they did was not harmless protesting. They endangered other people. There needs to be stronger action on disruptive protesting, and they need to grow up.
Lots of you seem to agree with that. Christina says, wonderful news that our legal system is finally growing a backbone. Activists should have lengthy time in prison as they should not upset people trying to get to work and ambulances getting people to hospital.
The costs to rescue services and taxpayers should be taken into account as a result of this sort of behaviour, says Jackie.
Sam says, all these groups have caused mayhem to vast members of the public going about their daily business. 3 cheers for the judge.
And John says, think about the loss to the economy when that bridge has been shut down for that length of time. I think it was about 37 hours.
So it was a long time,
I mean, that's...
wasn't it? Yeah.
And that, if you block that, it does cause absolute chaos. It's not just like shutting a small road, is it? So you're all for it. You're all for these tough sentences, sending a signal, being used as an example.
Yeah, Richard makes a good point. The sentence is good because it's not a peaceful demonstration closing a national bridge of importance because of your personal belief. And it is a national bridge of importance. I mean, it's a major highway between Kent and Essex, and it did have repercussions. It's really interesting, actually, with the judge's comments in that sentencing. He said basically that it garnered a lot of media attention because of its scale and novelty, and he was worried about what the next novel protest would be. Basically wanted to stop copycat instances, which you can see, can't you?
Well, get in touch with your thoughts on that. And if you think it is too harsh, we'd love to hear from you as well on all of that. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Now, coming up, brace yourselves, the Star says. We're about to freeze and then roast. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Morning to you. This is Breakfast at 6:41. Whether you're listening to us on the radio, watching us on TV, it's very good to have you with us today.
Yes, good morning to you. We're going to take you through some of the front pages now. And thousands of activists took to London yesterday and they're staying for a few days. Now, does that make your blood boil? Or are you filled with empathy? There's a great picture today on the front of the Times showing environmental activists protesting in Parliament Square yesterday. Have we got that picture? If not, I'll show it to you. It's these lovely lovely outfits, I must say. These ladies in Parliament Square. A little bit to my left over
there.
Here.
You go.
Does that work for you? There you go. So holding their fists up defiantly there in Parliament Square, all draped in red.
Yes.
It's a good picture.
Now, the Mail this morning showing an £8 billion mansion. But it can't be.
£8 billion.
Billion? I mean, heck, that belongs to a UK-based Russian oligarch. Friends of his, you want to be friends, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
so he spends a lot of time in his cinema room and loves reading novels. That's about £8 billion on a house. You expect it to be bigger than that for £8 billion quid.
Yeah, we're sure it's not million?
No, it says billion down there.
Wow. Where is it? That's what I'd want to know. It must be a good postcode. You'd hope so, for £8 billion.
Let's have solid gold toilets for that price.
Must be something like that. I wouldn't mind. I'd be friends with him to go to a house party, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. I wonder what the goodie bags are like.
Yeah. The Sun shows Prince Harry on their front page. They say he's homesick and desperate to attend the coronation next month.
Well, he is coming.
He is now. We finally know that, but not with his wife or his children.
It's interesting because it always makes headlines, doesn't it? This on the Mail this morning, a picture of the Queen, the late Queen, with some of her grandchildren, not all, it's worth pointing out, but some of her grandchildren.
Great grandchildren.
And apparently, the Princess of Wales, as she now is, took this.
Oh,
I think. It's interesting because the Queen, it looks like a snapshot, doesn't it? Because everyone's smiling apart from the Queen, who looks slightly sort of, well, not perturbed, but, you know, it's...
She looks older in that photo, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does.
The photos we've seen of her.
But it's nice, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like an ordinary shot.
Yeah, it does look like a real family photo, doesn't it? It made me realise how much I missed her, actually, looking at that photo.
It's hard to... sometimes you forget she isn't actually here anymore.
I know, and then you see things like that and it brings it home, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let us know what you make of that picture, gbnews@gbnews.uk.
Now, this morning, we're joined by radio legend David Hamilton and the writer Candice Holdsworth. Good to see you both this morning.
Good morning.
David,
Good morning.
as a legend, what do you make of the Express this morning?
Yes, the front page story is about Dominic Raab, who says that he was drummed out by snowflakes in the civil service. He says that he was forced out by activist civil servants. The report, by the way, suggested that staff had been upset by his inquisitorial, that's a good word, direct, impatient and fastidious style. And there's a fine line, isn't there, between bullying and being firm and getting your point across. And I think, you know, bullying in the workplace is horrible. A lot of us have suffered from it. And that awful, you know, Sunday night feeling when you're going in on Monday morning and you dread going in because the boss is so awful. You see, the Daily Mirror has the other side of the story and says a bully and a whinger. So, you know, as always...
What do you believe? What do you believe about this?
Well, I don't know him, so it's very, very hard to say. My daughter, funnily enough, lives in his constituency and had heard some not very nice things, I have to say that. So I may be a little bit biased, but, you know, he's blaming this on the snowflakes and, you know, people just basically wanted to get him out.
Do you think there is that generational divide? Do you think civil servants are snowflakes? And actually, this is just Dominic Raab being assertive and wanting things a certain way done in his office, and he's quite frank with asking for that. And these civil servants can't deal with it.
Well, yeah, basically, they didn't like him much, did they? And they wanted to get rid of him, and sure enough, it's happened. I think it's better that he resigned than... that he was pushed.
Well,
I think this is the best, Bit
of a fine line, I think.
Yes, but it's better, isn't it, when it happens that way rather than the other way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Rishi has lost a really good ally, you know, somebody who was very much on his side. So it's all very unfortunate. Everything he seems to try to do, somehow something thwarts it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets scuppered, doesn't it? Let's have a look at the Times, shall we? Because... Candice, the Extinction Rebellion lot are out and about in London as we speak for another 4 days or so. They're being mild-mannered, though.
Yes, well, according to this report on the front page of the Times, they're taking a different approach this year. And there were people quoted in the piece saying that they've learnt from their mistakes and they're not going to shut down the whole of London now. We'll see how it progresses, and we still don't really know what Just Stop Oil are going to be doing. I find this interesting that it's being reported this way. Clearly, they're aware of a lot of the criticism they've received, that their methods are polarising and people don't like it, and maybe they're not able to get their message across so effectively when they annoy people in the way that they do. A lot of people I know have said, oh, Extinction Rebellion's in town, let's see what's going to happen. So we'll see how things progress over the next few days.
And there'll always be extremists, won't there, in all spheres, but especially Extinction Rebellion. I mean, there are types within that group who do want to cause disruption.
They do. I mean, we saw what happened in Canning Town when they climbed on top of that train and just received such a bad response. And those were people sort of freelancing and doing their own thing. And, yeah, that caused a lot of problems for them.
It does make me nervous for the London Marathon on Sunday. Because,
well, we shall just have to see. Let's keep positive about it, though. Let's keep positive. Now, everyone's favourite Duchess, David, Meghan...
We love her, don't we?
Meghan of Sussex, according to The Telegraph, wrote to the then Prince Charles about racism.
Yes, this was after the Oprah interview, and she wrote to him complaining about racism in the royal family, and she wasn't happy with the response that she got from the prince, or now the king. So she's not really happy about anything, is she? She always seems to be in a fight. She's always fighting something.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we're all getting very
Well, we're getting fed up with it.
There.
I don't know if Harry's
getting very fed up with it, aren't we, really?
Yeah.
You're getting very bored with it. I mean, I think we're quite happy that she's not coming.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
He can come and sit behind a very large candle.
Everything's a problem, which is an issue.
Everything is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why doesn't she lighten up and have some fun?
Yeah. Well, yes, just like us.
2 young children and, you know, enjoy life in California.
With her millions of pounds, which they've now got. Candice, let's have a look at the Star to wrap up, should we? It's the weather. It says it was going to freeze and then we're going to roast.
I know. So this story on the front page of the Star said that there might be an Arctic blast next week, like a last gasp of winter before we start getting really nice weather before the coronation. So disappointing. I was really looking forward to winter being over. It has been a tough winter. It's just beautiful seeing all the blossoms out now and feeling like the weather's warming up. So one last blast would just be, so disappointing. But as long as we're on a track to get better weather, I'm OK. I can deal with it.
No, that'd be all right.
It does feel like there's been so many false starts with spring.
It's wonderful, isn't it? Spring is sprung. What a lovely time of the year. You know, daffodils everywhere. And we, as Candice said, we've been through this long, hard winter. It's the least we deserve. There's no happy news.
You can get your shorts on, David.
Absolutely, yeah. Get the old shorts on and get out there in the current bun. I love it. I hope that we're going to have a summer like we had last year. Everybody complained about it last year. I thought it was wonderful.
The heat wave we had.
Yeah, some people complain about anything. You know, complain about rain, snow. We have sunshine. Let's embrace it.
Yeah, well, we do like a whinge, David. Come on. When it comes to the weather, you can never suit all the people all the time.
Like a bit of a breeze, do you see?
How well? Yeah.
Sunny with a breeze.
Sunny with a. Oh yeah, nice. Yeah. Oh yeah. Barbecue
it makes a big difference to your mood, though, doesn't it? When you get up and it's light.
Do you know something? Even my dog is much happier. My dog is going out and playing in the garden, and you know, playing bally in the garden. She's so much happier. Even my dog is loving it.
There you go. You see. Sadly, nice. we've got to leave it there. David, Candice, thank you very much. Catch up with you a little bit later on. Now, if I was being romantic to Ellie Costello, I would say to you, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Oh, thank you.
See, there you go. We all remember some lines from Shakespeare, don't we? And they're often very romantic. But is the bard still relevant in 2023?
Well, this weekend marks the anniversaries of his birth and death more than 400 years ago. So is the great man still relevant, or is he a relic?
Well, our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, has the latest now from Stratford-upon-Avon.
Born in 1564, William Shakespeare is part of the definition of British heritage. This weekend marks what would have been the birthday of the man who changed the English language and theatre forever. Nicknamed the Bard by his friends because of his like for writing poems, Shakespeare wrote 38 plays, 2 narrative poems and 154 sonnets. But all of it started in Stratford-upon-Avon. Now, more than 400 years on, Shakespeare's work has what appears to be an everlasting legacy. Director of Knowledge and Engagement at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, Professor Charlotte Scott, says the playwright appealed to human value.
Shakespeare's interested in 2 very central markers of human value. One is power and the other is choice. And power and choice are central to the way his characters navigate their worlds, and those are deeply universal and resonant themes for everybody. He also has, as we know, because of the way in which his words have fallen into the English language, an extraordinary ability to touch on human emotion, on thought, and on the processes of both life and death in ways that are powerfully evocative and effective.
To be or not to be, that is the question. And while Shakespeare himself might be confined to history, his work still lives on in the language we speak today. What's done is done, cruel to be kind, and too much of a good thing are all phrases we still use. But even though our English is full of the bard's creations, should Shakespeare still be taught in schools? Journalist and author Rebecca Reed says the curriculum should be diversified.
Part of the argument for teaching less Shakespeare is always that we want to diversify the canon of literature that people are taught. And there are plenty of brilliant writers who are not male, not white, and not straight, all of those things. And it's really important that we're able to read literature that was written by people who are different from us, but it's also really helpful to read literature that's written by people like us. So I've always particularly enjoyed the Brontes. I really connect with the idea of being a female writer as a female writer. It just feels wrong that in a society where we have a very, obviously 50-50 gender split, and then also we have a multi-religious, multi-ethnic society. It seems wrong that the curriculum doesn't reflect that at all.
On the streets of Stratford, what do locals and tourists think?
Back in Australia, in Sydney, I'm studying Shakespeare. I'm in my last year of school at the moment. Just the way he changed the language and English language and the way we communicate is really, really special. And for education surrounding that, I think that's important to continue in the future.
There's something quite poetic about it. I certainly learnt about him in school and learnt to appreciate him.
He taught loads of slang back in the day, and I love that, like, now we've got so many of our words from him. So I think we should learn about that and see how language has progressed.
From the skull-grasping Hamlet to the ruthless Lady Macbeth, the imprint of Shakespeare on our heritage shows no sign of fading. All the world's a stage, and there he continues to stand. Jack Carson, GB News, Stratford.
Do you know how many words he invented?
How many?
15.
15.
Bandit, critic, dauntless, dwindle, elbow as a verb, to elbow someone out, I guess, green-eyed, as in jealousy, lacklustre, lonely, skimmed milk, there you go, swagger, unaware, uncomfortable, undress, unearthly and unreal.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's part of our everyday language now.
Don't even know it.
All of those words, yeah. I mean, what a legacy. It's incredible, isn't it?
We need the government to leave us a legacy on petrol prices, don't we?
Something.
This is Tim, right? Hi, Tim. Says, went on holiday near Barnstaple in Devon at Easter. Most petrol stations there, diesel was only 1p more expensive than petrol. On returning to Derby, it was about 15p more. Why is this? Because it's crazy.
It is. Alan says, I do not understand why the government in the UK do not do what the government here in Malta do. All petrol stations sell at the same price, which is regulated by the government.
Yeah.
Nice, wouldn't it?
Sue says you could increase what the government gets in tax from fuel. It pays for all immigrants in the country.
Yeah, and Linda actually completely agrees. She says the government are not doing anything about the fuel prices because it pays for illegal immigration.
Yeah.
And she says she feels like she's being blackmailed into getting an electric car. Well, that's something, isn't it? Because you don't pay for fuel, but the cost of an electric car is so expensive. I mean, it's out of reach, isn't it, for most people?
You still got to pay for the electricity, though.
And then you've still got to pay for electricity, which is also a fortune at the moment.
Yes, it is. You can't win. Oh, anyway, keep your thoughts coming through. Up next, we've got all the latest fallout from the Deputy PM's resignation. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The weekend will see showers and longer spells of rain across the country, though there will be some sunny spells start to turn colder, particularly across the north of the UK. The reason for the unsettled weather is low pressure is developing across the UK, and as this moves eastwards the end of Sunday into Monday, it allows a cold northerly airstream for many of us to start next week. Through into this morning, we've got some fog patches across southern England and Wales. These will quickly clear. Some brightness initially, but then further cloud and rain pushing into southern counties. Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England will have a cloudy day with outbreaks of rain, while Scotland will have the best of the sunshine once again today. Maybe a little bit cooler, but still highs of 16 or 17 Celsius here, so above average. Elsewhere, generally 12 to 14 Celsius, maybe 15 if we see any prolonged sunny spells. Into the evening time, a rather unsettled end to the day. We'll see a lot of clouds, showery outbreaks of rain swirling around across the UK. Driest conditions still holding on for western Scotland, but northern and eastern parts of Scotland turning wetter here. As a result of a lot more cloud around, it won't be quite as cold tonight. Temperatures generally 5 to 7 Celsius. But it means a fairly cloudy start to Sunday morning. Showery outbreaks of rain from the word go. Some of the rain could be heavy at times as it pushes north and eastwards. Generally cloudier, cooler picture across Scotland compared to the week just gone. And here some showers feeding in on quite a brisk northerly breeze developing. Northern Ireland also sunny spells and showers. And temperatures overall generally around, if not a little below average, starting to feel colder though across northern Scotland as that wind picks up. And that cold air spreads south through Monday into Tuesday with temperatures below average for the time of year. There will be some sunny spells on Tuesday though, ahead of further rain pushing in to the southwest on Wednesday.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
As we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Saturday the 22nd of April. Today, Raab's retribution. Oliver Dowden and Alex Chalk have come in to take over, but will Mr Raab have his revenge on the civil service? Ukraine will join the NATO family when the war is over, but is that just a red rag to the Russian bear?
Are petrol pump problems on the horizon? While the price of fuel jumped up yesterday for the first time in 6 months. And signed, sealed, delivered, Royal Mail rubber stamps a deal to end the postal strikes.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
We were asking earlier on this morning about a story. It's in the is it in the Times today? But it's about the sentencing of 2 Just Stop Oil protesters who climbed the Dartford crossing. And anyway, they've been jailed in total. It adds up to about 5 years. And I was saying, is this too harsh? Maybe it's not, but could it be too harsh? But anyway. You all seem to be in favour of it because it's set an example. The judge has said it's important to set an example with all of this sort of thing. Stuart has been in touch. He says 5 years is fair, especially when you think of the disruption and stress it's caused to millions of people who've missed long-awaited hospital appointments. I'm all for a cleaner world, but I don't want these entitled brats holding working people to ransom.
And do you know what? I think a lot of people would agree with you, Stuart, and it's the same as what Candice was saying in that newspaper review about Extinction Rebellion protesters on Canning Town when they held up that tube. When it affects working people who are just going about their daily lives and need to get to work or need to get to the hospital or whatever, that's when it annoys people. That's when it gets on the wrong side of people. You know, it's one thing being outside Downing Street to people who can actually make a difference. It's something else entirely when you're disrupting everyday people. Talbot makes a good point. He says climbing the Dartford Bridge not only puts themselves in danger, but others who have to bring them down. The sentence is correct and should be a warning to others who try to do similar stupid stunts.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because did you see it was in a lot of the papers yesterday about the boss, as it were, the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, who was pictured in the papers. I think the Sun had it first and foremost. A lady called Gail Bradbrook, and she was caught in Waitrose buying lots of expensive fruit that had been flown all around the world. So they worked it out. She racked up more than this is according to the Mail, 17,000 air miles in her shopping trolley, all wrapped in plastic, and then she drove it home in a diesel car. And my husband yesterday was saying, what would you do? And I said, well, wouldn't it be interesting if someone glued themselves to her bonnet? Because
in
protest, because what could she complain about that or not? I don't know.
Well, but it's something they care passionately about. It's exactly the same argument that they would have, isn't it?
Yeah, but she's been branded a hypocrite for that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Even with the M25 protests and climbing up with the gantries, I mean, they were all being dropped off in diesel cars, beaten up diesel cars. I mean, the hypocrisy, and of course she was shopping in Waitrose as well. I mean, it is a middle class thing, isn't it? It tends to be. Which is what
I think, from what Stuart says, entitled brats holding the working people to ransom. Now that isn't the case with everyone in these groups, but it's certainly the ones you hear from, isn't it? They seem to be very well-to-do, and not just actually having to get to work for a living, sort of thing, like the rest of us.
And it's like what you were saying yesterday, isn't it? I think with a lot of these things, it's optics, isn't it?
Yeah.
And perhaps if there were people of all walks of life that you saw protesting, maybe you might take it more seriously. Yeah. I don't know, is that fair?
I don't know.
It does seem to be a very small subsection of society that actually
it does.
But
I don't know, this co-founder in Waitrose, buying all the shopping in plastic packaging. Now, I do not support Extinction Rebellion, but I am very conscious. I try to buy stuff that isn't in plastic packaging, deliberately try to buy stuff that isn't in plastic, single-use plastic, because that is just a waste. So I really try. But if she's not even bothering with that, why should the rest of us? No. And she's leading a protest group.
It's a very good point. It is a very good point. Let us know what you make of that. Does that make your blood boil? Does it make you laugh? Let us know. Yeah. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Dominic Raab isn't laughing this morning.
He's not.
To be fair. He has warned that the public, me and you, will pay the price after he claims he was forced to resign yesterday. So, was the now former Deputy PM rightly sent packing?
Well, Mr Raab claims he was driven from office by activist, passive-aggressive civil servants. But this is despite the report into his behaviour concluding that he acted in an intimidating way with persistently aggressive conduct.
Well, our political reporter Olivia Utley managed to catch up with Dominic Raab straight after his resignation.
So thank you so much, Mr Raab, for coming to talk to us today. And of course, it's been quite a day for all of us, and most particularly you. Can I first ask, how do you define a bully?
I don't think it is for me to define it. Look, I'm very confident that I didn't behave in a bullying way. Most of these allegations were dismissed out of hand. And I think people watching this would be surprised that in scrutinising civil servants, in making sure that millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is not squandered, being able to pull very senior civil servants, not junior members of staff, up and say, look, I don't have the basic information to decide this. That was one of the things on which I was found to have been bullying because I defended someone, or because I said in relation to human rights reform, to get more foreign national offenders removed from this country, to strengthen free speech, I said I thought the department were being obstructive. If these kind of things amount to bullying, then I think it puts a handbrake, a paralysing effect on ministers delivering for the British people, and that can't be right.
Do you think, essentially, that the allegations were purely political, or do you think people genuinely felt threatened by you?
That's difficult to say. But the way my behaviour was characterised is interesting. Adam Tolley KC, very experienced barrister who conducted this investigation, found I'd never lost my temper, never over 4.5 years shouted or swore at anyone, but that some people found my direct style of probing, of interrogating, of scrutiny, unsettling or discomforting or even offensive. And I think there's a certain tyranny of subjective hurt feelings here, which, if you actually apply that across the board, means that senior ministers are at risk as they try and drive forward the change that the British public expect, try and protect taxpayers' money, try and deliver for the British people, can actually hold things back. I think if you look at that across the board, and particularly if you compare it to other walks of life, stressful jobs, high-powered businesses, but other walks of life more generally, I think people would be pretty surprised. The risk, of course, is that it leads government, ministers, politicians to look and feel to the public even more detached from reality.
You talk about a tyranny of hurt feelings, but do you think it might go even further than that? Do you think that perhaps civil servants coordinated a campaign to remove you, a political campaign?
Well, there was certainly some coordination. One of the complaints was struck out because they'd written it together. Look, put it this way. These claims, some of them were 4.5 years old. Another one was 2.5 years old. The vast majority were 8 months old. They were all submitted on the same day, which is 15th of November. I think a few came just a little bit later. That can't be coincidental. But I only know what I know. And I also know that I was warned by a very senior member of the government, a senior civil servant, that there are increasingly activist civil servants mobilised by the FDA union who are looking to target ministers. But all I know is that I think the bar has been so lowered now that the government we've got, and I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Prime Minister, is going to struggle to drive forward the changes we need. There'll be a chilling effect, a paralysing effect on ministers. I'm already, my phone is lit up by ministers now very concerned that they could be accused of these things for behaviour that in most walks of life would be regarded as important managerial scrutiny. And I think that must be wrong.
Let's talk to former UKIP Deputy Chair and political commentator Suzanne Evans, who joins us now. Suzanne, good to see you this morning. Has he been unfairly forced out, do you think? Or, you know, does the Tolley report actually have a fair point that he's behaved unacceptably?
Well, let's talk about the Tolley report, because I think it says right at the top of that report that the burden of proof was not that required in a court of law. And I think that's a very interesting comment that Adam Tolley made. I also think that report highlighted very specifically that he did not target anyone for specific treatment or bullying. And some of us might think, I mean, Dominic Raab refused to say what he thought a bully was in that interview we've just heard. But I think most of us would think that bullying is making someone the target of ill will, hatred, oppression, whatever it might be. But the report makes it quite clear that Dominic Raab didn't do that. The report also says that Raab didn't and couldn't have known the impact his behaviour was having on others. Again, I think most bullies know very much what they're doing and do it quite deliberately. It also said that he never swore, there was no physical abuse, he didn't abuse his power, there was no offensive or malicious or insulting behaviour, that he was perceived as being abrasive and difficult, but not intentionally. So I think, yes, he has been forced out. And I think it is a deeply worrying day for ministers, actually, to perhaps think now that they will be considered a bully if they tell someone to do their job properly.
All right, Suzanne, if that's the case, if that's the worst he's done, because it's all about perception, if that's the worst he's done, why has he gone? I mean, let's be clear, he didn't really resign, did he? He's been told he had to resign, one would imagine, from Number 10. But why have they insisted he's gone if actually the reality is most of us would look at that and go, well, that's not really bullying?
In a sense, I think he made a bit of a rod for his own back by saying that if the report found that he had been involved in any kind of bullying behaviour, he would go. And of course, the report doesn't exonerate him completely. As he's repeatedly said himself, the report dismissed all but 2 of the charges against him. But the fact is, those 2 charges remain. And I think he obviously is saying he's an honourable man. And so he said he would go if the report found any instance of bullying. So that's why he's gone. But I also do think you're absolutely right, Stephen. I think it was quite clear from the tone of his resignation letter that he didn't really want to go, that he felt he should stay, stand up to the kind of Sir Humphrey characters in the civil service who I'm sure were quite pushing back against some of his policies because they didn't like them, because he was trying to push a more right-wing agenda. They were wanting to pull back and have a more left-wing agenda. That's a very kind of black and white way of describing it. But yes, I think he was forced out, and I think it is a great shame, and I think a bit of a red flag indeed for other ministers who might be wanting to push difficult policies forward. I mean, of course, this also happened to Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary. She found that her harsh kind of anti-illegal immigration stance was not welcomed at the Home Office, and I think perhaps we're seeing a repeat now at the Ministry of Justice.
We had Luke Pollard, the MP, speak to our GB News presenter, Gloria De Piero, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? And he spoke about this culture in Westminster, and he said that bullying was rife, among other things. So are we talking about a toxic culture in Westminster that needs to be fixed? Or are we talking about what Jacob Rees-Mogg has come out and said, that we're actually just, the bar is too low, that this wasn't bullying at all, this is just the way that people work?
Well, as I said earlier, I think the fact that Dominic Raab was not shown to target anyone for specific ill treatment, his behaviour was not offensive or malicious or insulting, I think that is pretty proof conclusive, actually, that the bar is set far too low. If you're going to be talking about bullying in the workplace as something like somebody getting a little bit raising their voice in a meeting, then I think most people in managerial positions are going to be quite worried, frankly, this morning. If that's what it is now, if that's what it's come to, that we're not allowed to raise our voices in a meeting or get exercised about something that's happening in our workplaces, I do think that's very worrying. I mean, Dominic Raab never used the term about the civil service being snowflakes or too woke or whatever it might be. But I think that's what a lot of people are seeing, and it's what I have heard, not just from politicians, but also from people who are more robust, who work in the civil service. They are appalled at the levels to which it is stooping in terms of its snowflakery, its wokeness, everyone must state their pronouns, all this kind of stuff, and the way in which they actively campaign against government policy. I mean, I've heard people in the civil service say things about former Prime Minister Boris Johnson that I'm not going to repeat, that would make you blush. I mean, you think, how can they possibly do their job representing the government and the will of the government when they hold those opinions? It's really quite shocking.
OK, Suzanne, thanks very much indeed. Well, this has garnered mixed opinion from you, which is, actually is healthy, because there needs to be a debate about this. Sam, hi Sam, says, I don't believe Raab for a second. Why is he the only one who was investigated? If this was across the whole civil service, as he suggests, then more MPs would have experienced this.
Malcolm agrees, says, I'm appalled that a proven bully and his far-right supporters attempts to demean the impartial civil service in a deliberate attempt to scupper that impartiality. He is shameless.
Christina, though, says, of course, it was coordinated bullying by civil servants to remove him. I hope at some point they will be sacked for the sake of the country.
And Elaine says, disgraceful bullying of our Deputy Prime Minister by highly paid senior civil servants. What a state of affairs when basically they don't like being told to get on with their jobs, the one that they're paid to do. He's done the right thing in order to stop the Prime Minister having to waste his own time playing their game.
If he is tough, I mean, let's make no bones about it, he is a bit of a tough cookie, is Dominic Raab. But it's a case, is that bullying or not? Or is he just what you might call a bit of a argumentative boss or something? Paul says maybe he should stand for Prime Minister if he's tough. He can put the Conservatives in line and win the next election because the party's all over the place. He did stand at one stage, didn't he? It must have been when Boris Johnson took it in the end. He did put himself into the leadership. Didn't get very far, though.
It'll be very interesting to see what this does to him reputationally. I mean, our guest previously said that he's come out rather well out of this, standing up to the civil servants. But could he be marred by bullying claims? I mean, will people just think he's a bully and won't want him in Cabinet now? Be very interesting to see what happens next.
Tough person to work for. I mean, of that, there's no doubt. And perhaps he needs to tweak his, what we would call man management skills. That would upset people these days as well, wouldn't it? But you know what I mean. Perhaps that... But it's true, people get very uptight.
It's very true.
People management skills.
People, yes.
But, you know, it's... And it's not nice if you work for a boss who is quite abrasive. So I'm not saying it was nice to work for him, but there's a difference between that and bullying.
Where's the line? And that's what he says. He says, I upset some people, yes, but I'm not a bully. And it is very interesting what the report found. It said his behaviour was intimidating and insulting, unreasonable and persistently aggressive, and further than necessary or appropriate when delivering feedback. They say he was abrasive. But those claims of throwing things, shouting, all of that was dismissed. So being abrasive and going too far when delivering criticism is what he was found to have
But do they need to be thicker-skinned? As I said yesterday, if you work in a newsroom when you're thin-skinned, you'll last about 6 months.
And there are industries, aren't they, where they are, you know...
I'll give you a right dressing down after each show, don't I? Don't do that again.
Don't do that.
Don't.
He's lovely to work with. I texted you that yesterday, didn't I?
You did, actually, yeah.
With you.
I'm gonna post that on Twitter just to prove I'm nice.
It's a joy. But no, there are industries that are notoriously tough to work in. And perhaps you do need to be a certain type of person to put up with that work environment. Is Westminster one of them? Let us know what you think. gbnews@gbnews.uk. Certainly dividing people, isn't it? That's what we like to do. We like to have a bit
That's what we like to do. No, that's not what we like to do.
We don't like to divide people.
But
we
no,
like to have a conversation, don't we?
It's nice to hear both sides, because this is not a channel where we will tell you what to think. It's a channel where we want to know what you think and express all views. And that's what this is all about.
Yep.
So there you go.
And bringing you things that are going to make you talk. So we hope we're doing that this morning. Do get in touch on any of the stories we're talking about this morning. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
Now, to Ukraine, should we? Because Ukraine's place is in NATO, not just being an ally.
But it can't join until the war is over. But the NATO Secretary-General has said all members of NATO agreed on the move.
You've got to ask, though, is this just a red rag to a bull as far as Russia is concerned? Earlier we spoke to Robert Fox, defence editor at the Evening Standard.
A red rag to a not-so-very-red bull these days in Russia, if I could put it like that, as it gets more imperialist under Mr. Putin and less communist. It's very interesting. It's Mr. Stoltenberg's legacy. He hasn't just done it off his own bat. He is reflecting the concerns of a lot of East European members of NATO, with one really big exception, which is Mr. Orban's Hungary. What he is saying, I think, in code, not a very subtle code, is that Ukraine is an ally of NATO, though it is not in NATO. And as you rightly suggest, it would take ages for, in the best possible circumstances, for Ukraine to join NATO. The state of the economy, the state of democracy there, it must be said. It is not prepared for it. Look, you know, it was like a white tornado, as it were, the way Finland got in, just like that. You know, you'd have to be Tommy Cooper, if you remember him, to say that. The next one that is really interesting, I don't want to divert that, is to whether Sweden gets in, whether Turkey is going to block him. But the message from Stoltenberg, from the big visit of NATO to Zelensky, is, come on, we are expecting the summer offensives on both sides. You're going to need to do more. So you're quite right to ask whether this would provoke Russia or not. I don't think it's going to change a fig there. Russia is going to be provoked whatever happens, and it's calculating the odds as to how to push the war. What I think Stoltenberg was doing, the Secretary-General, whether he goes on being Secretary-General or not, and he has been a very strong leader, is, come on, I want to keep this in the headlines. Because the speculation about the famous summer offensives has gone on and on and on. It's been very unrealistic, actually, because you can't do anything until the weather is really good and the ground is really hard. Because even fighting with 40-ton tanks, which is what they've been doing up to now, is relatively easy in softish ground. The ground has got to harden because it's got to take 60 to 70-ton tanks. Leopards, dare I say, even those 14 Challenger 2s, and the Americans are going to be sending tanks now. But I think this is not good news for the British government, because I think we're moving up to a series of summits and declarations by NATO, and the big summit is at Vilnius in the Baltics in July, and they're going to say, in no uncertain terms, you have got to do more.
Yeah, fascinating stuff from Robert there. Now, believe it or not, 30 years ago, 30 years, Stephen Lawrence was murdered because of the colour of his skin. How are things different today? We'll find out. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest. Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, isn't it weird when you think about time passing? I know it goes faster the older you get, believe you me, I've worked that one out. But sometimes you get some dates and you just think, no, that can't be right. It is 30 years ago today since Stephen Lawrence was brutally murdered by racist thugs in southeast London, a crime which really changed our perception of racism in Britain.
But have things changed significantly, or have they changed enough since that dreadful day and the police investigation that followed?
Well, let's talk to Gaynor Bell, who's a campaigner against violent crime, who joins us now. Gaynor, it's really good to see you this morning. The Stephen Lawrence case was unusual in what seemed like a lot of ways at the time, I guess because it was so overtly racist and that just didn't seem to be taken seriously by the police. Do you think the police attitude has changed in the last 3 decades?
No, I don't actually. I think in some respects it's got worse. You know, you only have to look at the news to see how much racist murders are still going on. Not just racist, you know, knife crime, violent crime. I think it's got worse, to be honest.
Gaynor, we all know the image of Stephen Lawrence, don't we? It's almost etched in our minds as British people. What is it about this case, do you think, that stays with us?
I think, you know, he was an innocent boy, right? Doesn't matter what colour he is, because it happens to all, obviously, because of his race, you know, it stood out a lot more. But it's just the actual, how to explain the horrific way he died. You know, an innocent boy, his whole life ahead of him, and this is what stands out. But unfortunately, it still doesn't get home to young people how important it is not to have that knife in their pocket. But this is why it stands out. An innocent boy doing nothing wrong at all. And obviously, because it's his race, you know, it stood out more.
Well, why is it, do you think, that we are sort of up against a brick wall when it comes to knife crime? And it is often young people who are committing these crimes against other young people. And I know you tragically lost 2 of your sons, one to knife crime. I can't imagine what you've been through, Gaynor, to be perfectly honest. Cannot begin to imagine. But from all the work you've done since you lost Stefan in 2002 to knife crime, why do you think we've not seen a significant shift in our attitudes?
I probably did about 10 years. First of all, I started off working with victims who had lost their loved ones. That was going to court in the process. Then I decided that more needed doing to stop young people carrying knives, stopping this horrendous wave of knife crime, and I started going into young offenders. That was secure units that actually housed young people for many crimes, of, you know, violent crimes. Some of them had actually committed murders as well. I always felt that some of the parents should have been locked up when I heard some of the stories of the way they got brought up. So there's very, very many aspects of how can we stop this. It's basically parenting. And also, the government give out so much money to charities that is just wasted. When I say wasted, you go into it's education, 100% education. It's no good going into a school, doing a programme saying don't carry a knife, going through the whole aspects of what can happen, the ripple effect. Not only does this affect how it's affected me, it also affects the offender's family. You know, they're locked up. And it's trying to get through to them, you know, how it affects. But you go into a school, do that programme. It might be in junior school. By the time they get to senior school, they've forgotten about that programme. That programme should carry on right through their education and keeping it in their minds all the time. The consequences, every action, there is a consequence, and making them realise what the consequence is, making them realise what prison is like, making them realise, you know, how it affects everybody. That, I feel 100% that is the answer, getting it into the heads.
And do you think a lot of teenagers carry a knife? I mean, you talk there about family members. You think some parents should be locked up because of the way that these children have been raised. I mean, lots of these teenagers will be carrying knives thinking they don't have a choice. They think because so many other people are carrying knives, it's there as an act of self-defence. But the reality is, if they use that knife, there will be consequences. And it's not just the victim, it's their families, it's a whole community.
That's right. Yeah, for instance, I came across a young boy and he'd been just done for carrying a knife. I said, why were you carrying that knife? He said, last time I went out, he said, I had my bag stolen. He said, and I got beat up. He said, so I took, and he also, he pulled his trousers down. He'd been slashed on his backside. So he went out the next time. He didn't use a knife, fortunately, but he got caught carrying that knife. I've also spoken to other young people. Why did you go out with a knife? I went out for protection. I didn't mean to use it. I put it up and showed them, thought it would frighten them off. They didn't have a knife. They went to attack me, and that's how I used it. You mightn't have any intention at all of using a knife, but once you've got that knife in your pocket, you don't know what incident is going to be in front of you. You might only be waving it around saying, get away from me. The next thing, you don't even realise you've killed somebody. There's so many ways you can kill somebody. I used to say to young people, where do you think is a safe way to, stab somebody? And they'd say silly things like, in the leg, in the arm. They don't realise by cutting one of those veins, they can bleed out so instantly. And this is what we try and get through to them.
Yeah, and it's a harsh reality, isn't it? But one that people really need to learn. Again, we've got to leave it there, but it's really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Gainer's absolutely right. It's often about the parents as well in all of this. You look at the perpetrators of some of these horrific crimes, and you've got to say sometimes, I know it's a harsh reality, but you've got to say it's not always entirely their fault. No. It's not saying that, it's no excuse. They shouldn't have done it. They need to be punished for it. But you look at the backgrounds that they've had, and you think, sometimes you just think, well, I'm sort of not surprised.
No, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, in some cases, as Gaynor touched on there, they're literally dragged up. If you don't carry a knife, they feel, well, I'm the one who's going to be stabbed, I'm the one who's going to be killed.
But then what are you going to do with that knife?
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, what are you going to do with it? You're going to think you don't want my bike stolen again. Well, what are you going to do? Stab someone who tries to take it? Well, then you're getting done for, murder, potentially, aren't you? It's getting that through to young people. Let's hope it works, and the work that Gaynor does makes a difference.
And very important to have brave women like her, as you said, who lost 2 sons.
Lost 2 out of 3 of her children.
Absolutely tragic, but so brave. What a brave lady to come on here and share that message that, kids especially should not be picking up a knife. Don't ever think that that's the safe thing to do to protect yourself, because like she said, if it's in your pocket, you don't know what situation's going to be ahead of you.
Yeah.
Let us know what you make of that. And that anniversary as well, it's a poignant one.
30 years.
30 years.
Terrible. He was only 18, just a year younger than me, I think, to the day.
Really?
I think.
Really?
Yeah.
That picture does stay with people, doesn't it? I mean, I wasn't even alive when Stephen Lawrence was murdered, and I know that picture and I know his name. There is so much power to it.
I spent some time with Doreen, actually, might be about 10 years ago now, and she brought with her a load of, this picture she had with her, but also a load of others that were never released to the press. And that felt such a privilege to see those pictures of her son that aren't out there. And, he wanted to be an architect, very bright young man. It's just so tragic.
We feel like we know him, don't we, and what he could have been. There's something in that for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Look, have a look at this. This is changing tack significantly, by the way. There you go, front of the Sun. Homesick Harry, that's their headline. Apparently he's desperate to attend the coronation next month. What do you think? Send us your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. This is Breakfast.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:40, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
And there's some great stories running through today's papers. I'm going to show you some of them now. This is a good one. This is thousands of activists took to London yesterday. Really good picture, this. They're staying for a few days. Now, does this make your blood boil, or are you filled with empathy? This is in the Times. It's showing environmental activists protesting in Parliament Square yesterday, wearing what can only be described really as red kind of rope gown and a headpiece. And red gloves.
And white makeup. It's all very dramatic.
It looks like something in a horror film.
Yeah, and this makes my blood boil, actually. It's a house in the Daily Mail. It belongs to a UK-based Russian oligarch, Mikhail Friedman. But would you believe it's £8 billion? It doesn't look big enough.
It doesn't it? You want a lot more for your money than that.
I would have thought so.
I want to know where it is.
8 billion. 8 million, I could sort of say, oh, well, yeah. But 8 billion quid. Apparently he likes reading books and going to his cinema room, which is probably the size of Cineworld, you would imagine.
Well, you would want to spend time in a cinema room.
8 billion quid. It's just disgusting, really. Who's ever going to buy it?
Oh, wow, listen to this.
What,
it's said to be the capital's second largest private residence. Only Buckingham Palace is bigger. So there you are saying it's not big enough. It's the second biggest
well, it doesn't
home
look,
in London.
It doesn't look that big, does it?
Yeah.
I mean, it looks big, but it doesn't look 8 billion quid's worth big.
Oh, it does from this angle. Look at a different angle here.
Different angle.
It is palatial. Well, it has to be, doesn't it, for that? My God.
There's money and then there's money.
And The Sun shows Prince Harry on their front page. They say he's homesick and desperate to attend the coronation next month.
Sticking with Royal, this is a lovely picture of the Queen. The late Queen, we should say. It's hard to say that, isn't it?
It is.
With some of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In fact, they're all great-grandchildren, I think.
Yeah.
But there you go. Taken by the Princess of Wales, this picture. And it's not, I like it because the Queen just looks... She's not beaming away. It's not an official portrait. She's just been snapped. And I quite like that. It's like a very normal picture.
Yeah, she looks like a great-grandmother, doesn't she? Front
she
and
does.
centre,
It's lovely.
surrounded by lovely children. Do you know, I was so struck by how fair they all are. I didn't realise how blonde our royal family is, and the younger members of them are.
No, they are, aren't they?
They are. They all look. They have got a likeness, haven't they?
Well, they've got they've got hair.
They've got hair. Perhaps
Which won't
that's what it is. We're
last.
not used to it.
It won't last.
In our royal family. But it's a lovely picture, and it did make me realise when I saw this picture just how much we will miss her.
Yeah. And this is one for you. If you're enjoying the weather, brace yourselves. The Daily Star says it's going to freeze. We've got an Arctic blast, and then we're going to get a heat wave. So you won't know whether you're coming or going, basically. There you go.
What's new with British weather?
I know. Radio legend David Hamilton and writer Candice Holdsworth are both here. Morning, you two.
Morning.
Have you tried to get an appointment at the doctor's lately, David?
Yes, this is a story in the Mirror today. Around 10 million people are giving up hoping to get an appointment with their GP. I have to say this doesn't totally surprise me because I've never been able to see my GP. I think a lot of it is postcode lottery. I think some people, if you're lucky, you might get to see your GP. I don't think it helps if you live in the country, where I do. I live in Sussex. And my local surgery there, they had 3 doctors. One of them is now in Cornwall.
Oh.
But occasionally it takes phone calls, apparently.
Oh, right.
So I said,
Nice.
why is one doctor in Cornwall and not here in Sussex? And they said, well, it's either that or nothing at all.
Right.
Bit tough, isn't it?
They're calling the shots, aren't they?
Yeah, well, you know, there is a lack of doctors, too many patients and not enough doctors. And, you know, where do they get them from? But it's very sad, isn't it? And, of course, this throws more now onto the hospitals.
Yeah, exactly.
More people are going to outpatients.
Well, is there an issue with the way that the system works, in the sense that, I mean, in the UK, it's this horrible 8 a.m. rush, isn't it? So everyone get on the phone lines, and it feels like you're going to war to get an appointment.
It does, and some people have really criticised that. Why do they only take calls at 8 a.m? Because sometimes you can be on that call for 2 hours and just learn that you're very slowly inching up the queue, and people will just put the phone down. And they may really need an appointment. And like David says, they're worried, so they go to A&E. And then they put pressure on A&E.
Yeah.
But apparently there's also been a big surge in people using private GPs. So the Babylon app has seen a big surge in usage.
Really?
And I used that during the lockdown, actually. If, you know, there was something with my son, we needed us to get checked out, we would call them, they would do a video appointment.
It's all well and good, but I mean, what's it cost? 20, 30 quid or more? 40 quid?
Yeah, it's expensive. Private GPs are expensive. They're not cheap at all. And if you can afford to use them, great. If you can't, or say you're in a rural area, it's a real problem. It is a postcode lottery.
And if you needed a prescription, then you've got to pay private prescription charges.
Yes.
And that was even more expensive.
Yes, it's not a good system. It's a really poor system, and it's a pity that people are being driven down these routes.
The Sun, Candice. What they're saying about Dominic Raab?
Yeah, so I found this story interesting. It's in The Sun. It's someone who worked in the Ministry of Justice who says that actually it is a dysfunctional department. I'm not defending Dominic Raab, but I just find all these different perspectives on the issue useful, actually.
Yeah.
So this person was saying that actually he did have a go at him once, but actually it was deserved because the Ministry of Justice, like the Home Office, are 2 quite dysfunctional departments. And I have heard other government ministers say that people don't want to be placed in those departments because it can be very difficult. Having said that, I'm not saying that Dominic Raab is right, but I think there are so many different factors to consider when you're looking at this story, and it may be that he has got an abrasive personality, but he was also in a department where he did clash with people.
Yeah, I think he has got an abrasive personality. I mean, that's I think undisputable.
Yeah.
But is it bullying? That's the thing. Is it bullying? I just don't know.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between bullying and making your point firmly to the people that you're working for. And, you know, where does bullying begin and end. But if it is bullying, then there's no place for that. It's horrible.
No.
David, let's stay with you, shall we? And this is a story in the Telegraph. Brighton are banning second homes.
Yes, it's a Labour council, I think, in Brighton, and they want to ban people having second homes there. This is happening more and more, of course, across the country. We know it's been a big problem in the West Country, in Devon and Cornwall. I was in Chichester yesterday, which is
nice.
Yes, lovely, not too far away from Brighton. I was amazed at the number of homes that are being built there, and I think that there is a mass exodus from London. I think I thought, who are all these people, and where are they coming from? Chichester already has dreadful traffic congestion, and now you're building all these new homes. And I think that the people who lived in London are moving out, and there are new people now in London, and I think that's what's happening.
Right. Interesting. Mind you, I struggle with London. I don't live in London. Thank heavens. Drives me mad. And every time I say that, I get people moaning, saying they love London. If you're a Londoner and you love it, great, good on you. It doesn't do it for me. I'm a country boy.
Have you got a lot of building where you are?
Yes, they are. They are expanding where I am. Which is a scheme that was put in place originally by John Prescott, I think. It's been a long time coming.
Have they still got the stone cows?
Yeah, the concrete cows, yeah. They're still there. They're in a field somewhere now. We've got lots of real cows. Can we have a look at Shakespeare, Candice, in the Times? Because it's 400 years this weekend since he was... Well, it's more than 400 years since he was born and died.
I know, it's amazing. I still think he's relevant. I found this so interesting, the story in the Times. It's a professor called Erik Rasmussen from Nevada University, and he hunts down first folios, so first editions of Shakespeare manuscripts. And what they quoted a few events in the story where these manuscripts have turned up in the most unusual places. So one was a bodyguard of Fidel Castro.
Wow.
Had a Shakespeare manuscript, and it turned out it had actually been stolen from Durham University, but circuitously it ended up in his hands. Who knows how? There was another one. There was a widow who died in Tottenham, and it turned out that she had this battered first copy of Shakespeare in her possession. No one knows how she got hold of it, but she did.
Wow.
She didn't even know she had it. So this guy really, he hunts in all these amazing places. He even said sometimes it can just like turn up in an attic or something like that. People have no idea the value of these things that they have.
It must be millions, you would have thought, for something like that. We've got to leave it there, but we'll see you a little bit later on.
Okay.
David, Candice, thank you very much indeed. Now, also today, the Health Secretary says he's going to court to stop the Royal College of Nursing striking at the end of the month. Now, that action is planned for the 30th of April. Pat Cullen, the union's General Secretary, has described it as nakedly political from a bullying government. He says they haven't got the mandate to actually do it.
The CBI has suspended all policy and membership activity after dozens of the biggest names in British business quit the organisation after further allegations of rape. John Lewis, NatWest, Jaguar, Land Rover and BT are among those to pull out of the trade body. The CBI says it shares the shock and revulsion over the allegations.
And the family of Stephen Lawrence are holding a memorial service today to mark the 30th anniversary of his murder. The 18-year-old was killed in a racist attack in south-east London. The Mayor of London and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will attend the service.
Well, let's get the latest in the world of showbiz, shall we? Stephanie Tecci is joining us in the studio.
Good morning, Stephen and Ellie.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Shows always.
Yes, well, you always are, yeah.
And now I'm talking about you guys. I said good shows always.
And you're about to make it even better by June. You've got lots of showbiz news for us.
Yeah.
Should we start with Kevin Spacey?
Kevin Spacey, yes. He's been facing a lot of legal battles and a lot of legal woes. Yesterday, he appeared via video link to to Southwark Crown Court in London because he's facing 12 allegations of sexual assault. The judge has confirmed that his court case, his trial, will start on June 28th and it will be a 4-week case. He's facing 12 allegations of sexual assault from 4 different men. The time spans between 2001 and 2013, and during that time he was the artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre. But, you know, for Kevin Spacey, he's denied all of these charges, but he's had so many legal battles. It was only last year he faced a 40 million court case with Anthony Rapp, who had accused him of sexual assault, which Kevin did win and he defended himself. But then also he's starred in things like House of Cards, and again he was sacked off that because of sexual misconduct. So he's had a rough few years.
He has. It's interesting because he tried to make a bit of a comeback, didn't he? Released some weird House of Cards related things, and that not worked.
No, it didn't go down well because he's had all these court cases hanging over his head. He's quite adamant that he's going to, you know, be able to be proved innocent in these cases. But what's been happening over this period of time, there's been a lot of evidence which has been gathered up.
I mean, the problem is, even if he was to be proven innocent, the damage is done.
The damage has been done, and I think it's hard to pick your career back after that because I think, you know, you could be a Hollywood darling one day and then a Hollywood monster the next day. So it's hard, you know, people are not going to want to be associated with such an actor on productions, and it's a shame because he had an amazing career. If you think of films like American Beauty, one of the most iconic films of all time. So it's a shame that it's ended this way for him. But
should we have a quick word on Alec Baldwin? You were talking to us yesterday about criminal charges being dropped, but we now know the family are going to sue him.
Yeah, the family say they're going to continue pressing ahead with suing him. You know, the lawyer said that, you know, Mr. Baldwin may pretend that he is not responsible for pulling the trigger and injecting a live bullet which ended Helena's life. He can run to Montana and pretend that he is just an actor in a Wild West movie, but in real life, he cannot escape from the fact that he had a major role in a tragedy which had real-life consequences.
All right, well, that's going to rumble on, isn't it?
Yes.
Stephanie, I'll see you a little bit later on.
See you a bit shortly.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Up next, we'll bring you all the latest updates from the Raab resignation. This is Breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The weekend will see showers and longer spells of rain across the country, though there will be some sunny spells start to turn colder, particularly across the north of the UK. The reason for the unsettled weather is low pressure is developing across the UK, and as this moves eastwards the end of Sunday into Monday, it allows a cold northerly airstream for many of us to start next week. Through into this morning, we've got some fog patches across southern England and Wales. These will quickly clear. Some brightness initially, but then further cloud and rain pushing into southern counties. Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England will have a cloudy day with outbreaks of rain, while Scotland will have the best of the sunshine once again today. Maybe a little bit cooler, but still highs of 16 or 17 Celsius here, so above average. Elsewhere, generally 12 to 14 Celsius, maybe 15 if we see any prolonged sunny spells. Into the evening time, a rather unsettled end to the day. We'll see a lot of clouds, showery outbreaks of rain swirling around across the UK. Driest conditions still holding on for western Scotland, but northern and eastern parts of Scotland turning wetter here. As a result of a lot more cloud around, it won't be quite as cold tonight. Temperatures generally 5 to 7 Celsius. But it means a fairly cloudy start to Sunday morning. Showery outbreaks of rain from the word go. Some of the rain could be heavy at times as it pushes north and eastwards. Generally cloudier, cooler picture across Scotland compared to the week just gone. And here some showers feeding in on quite a brisk northerly breeze developing. Northern Ireland also sunny spells and showers. And temperatures overall generally around, if not a little below average, starting to feel colder though across northern Scotland as that wind picks up. And that cold air spreads south through Monday into Tuesday with temperatures below average for the time of year. There will be some sunny spells on Tuesday though, ahead of further rain pushing in to the southwest on Wednesday.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have.
No one will be cancelled.
Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. It's Saturday, the 22nd of April. Today, Raab's retribution. Now, Oliver Dowden and Alex Chalk have come in to take over his old jobs, but will he have his revenge on the civil service? Ukraine will join the NATO family, but only when the war is over. But even so, is that offer just a red rag to the Russian bear?
Are petrol pump problems on the horizon? The price of fuel jumped up yesterday for the first time in 6 months. And signed, sealed, delivered, Royal Mail rubber stamps a deal to end the postal strikes.
Very good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. We're talking about Just Oil. Is it Just Oil?
Just Stop Oil.
Well, no, it's Extinction Rebellion protesters, weren't they? They were jailed, 2 of them.
No, they're Just Stop Oil.
They were Just Stop Oil.
Yeah.
I was right the first time.
You
There
were,
go.
darling.
They were jailed collectively for 5 years. We're asking, is that a fair sentence? Should they have been jailed?
Yeah, they were climbing the Dartford crossing.
Yeah.
Right, they were up there for a long time. It caused absolute chaos all on the M25, that key link between Kent and Essex.
Yeah. 37 hours, isn't it? They were up
but
there for.
it's tough. It's a big sentence for that sort of disruptive protest. But is that fine? Do judges need to be making an example out of people like that?
Well, but jail says, apparently, we haven't got the name. Jail for protesters, says this person. It's not the act, but the consequences and the cost to others that count.
Yeah.
And Mike says, one can only hope they serve the full 5 years in prison. No parole for them.
Oh, well, no, they'll get out, but they'll be on licence for the rest of it. It's not like you're just out and can go and do what you like afterwards. They will be on licence till the time is up. But it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's setting an example. Will that deter other protesters? That's what the judges said yesterday. He said he really wanted to put other people off, because what will happen next if these people just keep continually being allowed to sort of walk away from jail, get a slap on the wrist?
Yes, the judge's comments were really interesting, weren't they? He said you have to be punished for chaos caused and to deter others as well. He was worried about copycat actions, wasn't he? So it's the first time that we've seen such a long sentence. Just Stop Oil have said that it's the longest sentence for a peaceful protest in British history. They're not very happy.
No.
Do you think it's fair? Is this the way that it has to go to stop copycat actions? Let us know.
Yeah, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We would have got the reaction, or tried to get the reaction, of Dominic Raab, the Justice Secretary, except he's not anymore, is he, after that resignation yesterday morning. But he's now said that the public, that you and I, will pay the price because he was forced to resign. So, was the now former Deputy PM rightly sent packing?
Well, Mr Raab claims he was driven from office by activist, passive-aggressive civil servants. But this is despite the report into his behaviour concluding that he acted in an intimidating way with persistently aggressive conduct.
Well, our political reporter Olivia Utley caught up with Dominic Raab pretty soon after that resignation yesterday morning.
So thank you so much, Mr Raab, for coming to talk to us today. And of course, it's been quite a day for all of us, and most particularly you. Can I first ask, how do you define a bully?
I don't think it is for me to define it, but look, I'm very confident that I didn't behave in a bullying way. Most of these allegations were dismissed out of hand, and I think people watching this will be surprised that in scrutinising civil servants, in making sure that millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is not squandered, being able to pull very senior civil servants, not junior members of staff, up and say, look, I don't have the basic information to decide this. That was one of the things on which I was found to have been bullying because I defended someone, or because I said in relation to human rights reform, to get more foreign national offenders removed from this country, to strengthen free speech, I said I thought the department were being obstructive. If these kind of things amount to bullying, then I think it puts a handbrake, a paralysing effect on ministers delivering for the British people, and that can't be right.
Do you think, essentially, that the allegations were purely political, or do you think people genuinely felt threatened by you?
That's difficult to say, but the way my behaviour was characterised is interesting. Adam Toddie KC, very experienced barrister who conducted this investigation, found I'd never lost my temper, never over 4.5 years shouted or swore at anyone, but that some people found my direct style of probing, of interrogating, of scrutiny unsettling or discomforting or even offensive. And I think there's a certain tyranny of subjective hurt feelings here, which, if you actually apply that across the board, means that senior ministers are at risk as they try and drive forward the change that the British public expect, try and protect taxpayers' money, try and deliver for the British people, can actually hold things back. I think if you look at that across the board, and particularly if you compare it to other walks of life, stressful jobs, high-powered businesses, but other walks of life more generally, I think people would be pretty surprised. The risk, of course, is that it leads government, ministers, politicians to look and feel to the public even more detached from reality.
You talk about a tyranny of hurt feelings, but do you think it might go even further than that? Do you think that perhaps civil servants coordinated a campaign to remove you, a political campaign?
Well, there was certainly some coordination. One of the complaints was struck out because they'd written it together. Look, put it this way. These claims, some of them were 4.5 years old. Another one was 2.5 years old. The vast majority were 8 months old. They were all submitted on the same day, which is 15th of November. I think a few came just a little bit later. That can't be coincidental. But I only know what I know. And I also know that I was warned by a very senior member of the government, a senior civil servant, that there are increasingly activist civil servants mobilised by the FDA union who are looking to target ministers. But all I know is that I think the bar has been so lowered now that the government we've got, and I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Prime Minister, is going to struggle to drive forward the changes we need. There'll be a chilling effect, a paralysing effect on ministers. I'm already, my phone is lit up by ministers now very concerned that they could be accused of these things for behaviour that in most walks of life would be regarded as important managerial scrutiny. And I think that must be wrong.
Let's talk to political commentator David Aldroyd-Bolt, who's here in the studio. Good to see you this morning. What do you make of this?
I think it's a great shame that somebody is being forced out of his job for acting with rigour, discipline and an expectation of competence from civil servants. We've seen from Adam Tooley's report that Mr Raab worked incredibly long hours, and there is no suggestion from Adam Tooley that he was anything other than intelligent and full of dedication in his application to the job, and he seems to have expected the same from his civil servants. Now,
doesn't sound like he's been a good boss, though.
Well, I suppose there are different styles of expectation, different styles of managerialism nowadays, and Mr Raab's is perhaps a rather old-fashioned one, that he demands that people are as competent in their jobs as he is in his. That I read the report yesterday. He expected that when he had a briefing with civil servants, they should be as well briefed as he is. Well, what's wrong with that? He expected that they wouldn't go over the briefing documents and waste time, that they would reach points and actually discuss the substantive issues. Well, I think that's rather good use of time. Given that we're paying for their time out of our taxpayers' money, I think it's right that a minister should make the best use of that time rather than just rehashing things that have already been discussed. I think the point that is clearly at greatest issue is the one of physical gestures, and whether Mr Raab's gestures were intimidating, whether by design or by fault. And I think, several times in this Adam Tooley case, he says that Mr Raab was not aware and could not reasonably have been aware of the intimidating effect that his behaviour had on others. So it seems that this was an entirely unconscious thing on Mr Raab's part. However, he was asked about it several times by civil servants.
But do bullies know they're bullies?
I'm not really sure whether this could be taken as an instance of bullying. I think we have to be terribly careful with that.
The report upheld bullying allegations, two of them.
It did, indeed. And, Adam Tooley is a highly respected silk, and therefore we must take his report as being read in good faith. But I wonder whether this is an instance of a culture that's become too easy to say that someone is being bullied when, in fact, they're being held to higher account. And people have different styles of management. What about Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United? Would he nowadays be accused of bullying his players?
Probably.
Would he? And would it matter if he were, if you get the results? If you go into a job expecting that there are going to be extremely high standards and that those high standards and the pressure under which you work causes sometimes outbreaks of temper or what you might call abrasiveness, is that necessarily a cause for someone to be told that they are a bully? I'm rather more sceptical than the report.
But this, you see, this is the problem with this, though, isn't it? That you're sort of saying, well, is it really bullying? And the way you phrase it and put it forward, I think most of us would say, well, it's not really bullying. He might not be a great boss in some respects, might be a bit aggressive or abrasive, but it's not bullying. However, as Ali said, bullying allegations were upheld.
They were upheld.
So on that basis, he had to go, didn't he?
Oh, and Mr Raab had said that were the allegations upheld, he would go. So he'd made a cross for his own back. There was no way that he was going to be able to stay after this. I think it is reasonable that he should have been allowed a right of reply, which he's had in the Daily Telegraph article. And perhaps it is an instance of culture having changed and someone being part of a different paradigm. And, in Mr Raab's world, and particularly with his background in martial arts, it was perfectly reasonable for him, as he understood it, to demand in this way, to act in this way, to be physically demonstrative. I don't think there was any suggestion at all that Mr. Raab was in any way physically abusive, but he was clearly using strong body language to get his points across, which civil servants were not comfortable with.
Let's talk about that difference in culture. We got that resignation letter that we can get up, because it is very interesting, isn't it? Because there isn't an apology in that resignation letter. It's not really an accepting of the report's findings. He does say that the findings are flawed and it sets a dangerous precedent. You just touched there about culture and differences in culture. Do you think this highlights the increasing divide between civil servants and ministers?
I'm not sure if it's a divide between civil servants and ministers. I think perhaps it's more of a generational divide, that younger people are not used to being talked to in a direct way, and that they find it threatening. When it to an older generation, I mean, Mr. Raab is, you know, what might by any generous standards be called middle-aged now, it was perfectly reasonable to be talked to in a direct way to get the best results at work, because it's understood that this is a professional environment, not one where you come to be cosseted and cuddled and warmed by your boss. You're there to do a job. In the case of civil servants, you're being paid by the British taxpayer, being paid rather generously, and therefore high standards are expected. And I think that's perhaps the great divide. It's not one between civil servants and ministers per se, because I believe most civil servants act in a very probus manner, and one that shows the greatest regard for their positions. However, it is perhaps the case that ministers coming into this, who are not, let us remember, professionals, these are politicians who have come into this and are told, here's your brief, go and do it.
Can we just be very clear?
Yes.
Dominic Raab is a young man. He's 6 days older than me.
Well, that makes you a very young man.
He's a very, very young man for the job he was doing. The problem is, and I sort of worry slightly about conspiracy theories. And what do you mean? Is Mike's been in touch. Morning, Mike. He says the civil service is now dominated by left-wing, university-educated staff that want their agenda followed, irrespective of what party is in government. Is that a fair assessment or not? Because I don't know enough about how it all works to be a judge.
It doesn't strike me as a fair assessment on the basis that they're not... I don't believe that they are politically actively left-wing, except in a minority of cases. I think what they are is a university-educated and therefore small L, unconsciously liberally biased group of people working in a metropolitan centre that is itself liberally biased, and so they're not going to reflect, say, a breadth of opinions that you would find in the country, because it's not a terribly broad spectrum of intellectual culture. You know, the civil service is all about diversity, but it seems that that's very much a skin-deep thing. It's a diversity of appearance and a diversity of sexuality. It's not really a diversity of intellectual approach or hinterland. How could it be? They're recruiting from a very narrow pool.
Oh, yeah. So that needs to change.
Well, does it? I mean, do we want the civil servants who, again, we are paying out of our tax money very generously to be the brightest and the most intellectually gifted and therefore the greatest administrators, or do we want them to have a breadth of political opinion? Actually, they're not supposed to have any political opinion. That should be left at the door. It's absolutely enshrined in the civil service that there should be no outward appearance of politics. We know that this has not always been the case, and I think where it hasn't been the case, it's been dealt with rather well recently. I'm desperately wary of conspiracy theories of that sort, and I don't want to cast aspersions on a civil service that is still, I think, by and large, one of the better ones in the Western world.
OK. David, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Vera, hi Vera, says the interview with Dominic Raab is brilliant. I fully agree with him. This will lower standards. He's never shouted or sworn. It's a bit like the Boris situation. Senior civil servants are deciding what they want for the country.
Paul said maybe he should stand for PM. If he's tough, he can pull the Conservatives in line and win the next election, because currently the party is all over the place.
A bit of sort of common sense from Tony. Morning, Tony. He says, I've never been a fan of Dominic Raab, but he is correct about all of this. If I worked in a screw factory, I wouldn't be allowed to make nails. Civil servants can always stand for Parliament if they want to be the boss.
This is an interesting one from Richard, because there was a claim from Dominic Raab in some of his interviews that civil servants didn't like some of the reforms, including Brexit. Richard replied to that and said, I think Dominic Raab is correct. Look at the evidence. Priti Patel, Suella Braverman and Dominic Raab, all accused of bullying all Brexiteers. This has been opposed by the civil service since the referendum. The question needs to be asked, is the swamp the civil service? I would say quite likely.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know if that falls under the conspiracy theory.
Well, that's what civil servants are saying, aren't they? Saying it's dangerous.
Yeah, I think it's like all of these things. There may be some concerns with a number of civil servants, but that doesn't mean the whole civil service does it? I just think we've got to be a little bit careful. Not everyone's a fan of Dominic Raab and what he's saying, though. Got to be said. Sean, morning Sean, says, Robot Raab has brought this on himself. He has no people skills. He's a monotone, politics by numbers automaton.
Oh, well done, reading that.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
I'm semi-professional, you know.
It's quite good, yeah.
But I mean, and I've worked for some bad bosses who have no people skills, and they're not necessarily bad people or bad at their job, but they have no people skills, and that does make life very difficult at times. And I sort of think there is something to be said for being a good boss, and I, you know, if Mr. Raab is abrasive and sort of aggressive, I don't think that means bullying, but I do think that should be looked at. It's not a sacking offence, but I think someone should take him to one side and say, you know, you need to improve your people. You get more out of people if you bring them on side.
Yeah. And as we were just saying, does a bully know they're a bully? I mean, he has said since in TV interviews that he knew he'd upset people. He doesn't consider himself to be a bully, but do bullies ever know? Really?
Yeah.
Are they aware of what they're doing? I don't think they do.
No.
Should he have resigned? Was that the right thing to do, or did he make a rod for his own back, saying that he would if bullying allegations were upheld? Because what's happened is they were upheld. He doesn't agree with them, does he?
No, but he's had to go.
But he's had to go.
It's an interesting one. Keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, our very own Aidan McGee will be with us very shortly to take us through all the sport happening this weekend. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Very demanding, this one.
No, I'd just like to be clear.
Very demanding.
So is it you or is it me?
Don't go on strike on me.
I won't.
Whatever you do, then there'll be trouble. Anyway, thankfully, some of the strikes are coming to an end, which is good news. Royal Mail has agreed to a pay deal with the Postal Workers Union to end a long-running and bitter dispute that led to the first national strike since its privatisation a decade ago.
Well, the company said it had reached a deal after talks with the Communication Workers Union, which represents around 112,000 postal workers.
Let's talk to Andy Fury, who's Deputy General Secretary of the CWU. Good to see you, as always, Andy. So what's on the table with this deal, then? Because last time we talked, you made it very clear that it's, money is an issue, obviously, but it's also about working conditions and where you saw management taking the company. So what's changed?
Well, we're pleased we've reached an agreement, and our members will decide if they think it's worth supporting, and we are confident they will. The agreement provides for no compulsory redundancies. It ensures that the union is involved in change on the ground and nationally, and it gives protection away from the gig economy and protects jobs and our working conditions. So it's a package. It includes pay. There's many aspects to the agreement. It's 36 pages long, so we've got a job to convince our members to get behind it, but we're confident we can do that when we get out there and explain the benefits of the deal to our members.
Now, are you confident when you look at the nurses, because the unions can recommend deals to their members as much as they like, but as we saw with the nurses, it doesn't mean that they're going to agree. Do you think your members will actually support this deal?
Well, look, our members are magnificent. As we've spoken before, Ellie and Stephen, they worked tirelessly during the pandemic. They delivered to 32 million addresses 6 days a week. They are part of the fabric of society. They deserve respect and dignity, and we think this agreement does that for them. So, look, we will be embarking on a massive communications programme. We'll be engaging on our members. We'll be explaining the benefits of the agreement to them. Look, we haven't got everything we want. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but neither is the employer. We think this is a reasonable and fair way forward, but crucially it ensures that our people have job protection, job security and a very decent job going forward.
It's all about compromise though, isn't it, Andy? And I know it looks like, doesn't it, there's going to be Sunday working built into some of this. Is that going to go down well?
Well, look, we've always done Sunday working. Actually, this is one of the myths about the dispute. I mean, we've got thousands of our members work every Sunday ordinarily. So new entrants will be contracted to work Sundays, maximum of 5 days a week. So there will be proper rest days. We will find a way through this through proper imaginative scheduling. We will obviously ensure that our members' views are taken into account when it comes to working patterns and terms and conditions.
Can I ask about that? I mean, you sort of skimmed over the pay rise issue. What sort of percentage has been put on the table here? Because it's interesting just to put it into context with what else is happening across striking unions. What have you settled for?
Yeah, well, Stephen, as you reported, when we've met before, we've always said this was never about pay in totality. It was much wider than that. So the pay agreement provides for a 6% pay increase from April this year, plus a £500 lump sum one-off payment. That's circa 2%. There's a further 2% next year. And there's a commitment that going forward, rather than just giving shareholders dividends, our members will have a 20% share in any profit first before there's any dividend payments to shareholders. That's quite unique, we believe, and we believe that's an opportunity for members to share in the success of Royal Mail.
OK. How much do you think public support has weighed in on this and getting a deal with the government? Because when we've spoken to you before, you have said posties have been struck, really, by public support when they're out and about.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think the public really does cherish their postal workers. They see them day in, day out. They are there to support them. There's lots of cases where there's, unfortunately, people fall ill or they need support and assistance. Ambulances being called. We've stopped house fires when our members have turned up on the doorstep. So, look, Royal Mail members are greatly respected by the public. They do a great job 52 weeks a year in all weathers, and the support from the public has been tremendous, and that has undoubtedly helped at the morale of our members.
Can you have a word with my postie, Andy? Because he told me off for looking too scruffy for the telly the other day.
Yeah, well, our members are very witty, and they're not running forward in telling people their opinions.
Yeah, it's why we love them, though. It's why we love them. Andy, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Andy. But he clearly feels comfortable enough with you.
Yeah, but you see, that's nice. Because the nice thing is, if you get on with your postie, and then it's things like if you're not in, or, you know, they can sneak a parcel in somewhere where they know it's not going to be found or whatever they need to do, they look after you.
They do, they do.
That's the nice thing.
It's like an extended part of the family as well. They often know the pets, don't they? Know the dogs by name. And yeah, they are, as Andy just so rightly said, a fabric of society, aren't they? Yeah, well, do you know what? He's almost a bit reluctant to talk about the percentage rise, but 6% plus 500 quid as a one-off. You see, that sounds reasonable to me. I don't know what they went in asking for. Onwards. Yeah, but you see, that's you sort of can't look at that and say, well, they're being desperately greedy. No. No.
Because that sounds quite reasonable, actually. That's that sort of figure, 5-6%, so...
Yeah. I think lots of people would agree that their postie's worth that as well. Let us know what you think of that, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But that doesn't mean the members are going to accept it. That's a very key point.
No, it doesn't. If you are a postie, and that's obviously now down to you, get in touch. Let us know if you think it's a good deal or not.
Yeah. As we saw with the nurses, don't want to jump the gun with that, do we?
No, got to be careful. No. Anyway, we're offering Ada McGee a tenner for hanging about a little bit longer this morning. He's here with all the latest sport morning. Yes, all. It's all you.
Sound fair and reasonable to me.
It's all you're getting. It's all you're getting. Now, you said yesterday, Mr. McGee, that it was just a bit of a bog-standard game between Arsenal and Southampton yesterday.
Well, sure, it was top versus bottom.
Yeah.
And so... But what unfolded was a minor Premier League classic, it has to be said. Southampton, I wasn't expecting them to get anything in that game. They had no real form. They lost at home to Crystal Palace last week, who are resurgent under Roy Hodgson. It looked for all the world as if they'd accepted their fate. But they produced a performance from the gods last night. They were 2-0 up within 14 minutes. Arsenal got it back to 2-1, but then Southampton were leading in the second half in the 66th minute through their substitute, Chaleta Sarr. They had a couple of injury problems on the night as well. One of their players, Southampton, almost refused to go off because he was ruled off by his medics of both clubs for a concussion injury. But he said, I'm absolutely fine. But he had to go off anyway. So they had problems, but they found themselves leading 3-1. And then Arsenal, the stadium was flat. And then they produced something special in the last 4 minutes or so. Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard got them back in the game for 3-3. Now, a point isn't really much good to either side. The key thing now, and Jamie Carragher thinks that Arsenal are going to need something miraculous against Manchester City on Wednesday. It's a huge, huge game now. They have to go to the Etihad and get a result. They really need to win, in all reality. Shades of 1989 here, actually, because, in fact, eerily so. George Graham back then had a very young Arsenal team. They'd streaked ahead throughout the season. It looked as if they were going to win their first league title since 1971. And then they were reeled in gradually, week by week, by the eminent power of the time, which was Liverpool. And then they went to Anfield, won 2-0 and won the league in the last minute. Now, I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as that because on Wednesday, it's not the last game of the season, but it's very similar. Those two teams are the youngest teams in the league on show last night. Arsenal have done extremely well to set the pace, but they have got Manchester City breathing down their neck. They're going to need something really special on Wednesday night. And you know what? If they deliver on that night, I think they will go on to win it. But I was never convinced by Arsenal throughout the season, just because City have the strength in depth. Arsenal have had to make a couple of changes, enforced changes in recent weeks, and you've seen people like Rob Holding come in. He's not quite the same as William Saliba, and so it's the squad that's going to do for them. I think ultimately, I think Manchester City will win on Wednesday. But you know what? It was a great game last night.
I'll tell you what. Looking forward, though, I'm looking at the one that gets me is Crystal Palace versus Everton today, just because I want Roy to win.
Yeah, I know everyone wants to, but he's won 3 in a row.
I mean, yeah, you sort of want that streak to continue.
It is.
You?
You know what he's done? It's tactical flexibility. Because he doesn't play the way the Crystal Palace... He doesn't instinctively play the way the Crystal Palace team have been playing under him in the last 3 weeks. But he's gone in there and he said to himself, you know what, these players aren't suited to the way I want to play, so let's let them play how they want to play. And he's just let them cut loose. And they've scored all these goals. I mean, they went four matches under Vieira without a shot on target. And then they scored 5 at Southampton. They won, 5 at Leeds, 2 at Crystal Palace, and obviously 2 against Leicester. 9 goals in 3 games. And I fancy them to win today because Everton are in all sorts... They're losing a bit of form just at the key time. And it's looking... They're out of the bottom 3 on goal difference. So, yeah, a few decent games today as well. I think Palace v Everton is the pick of them all to me. But then you've got the semi-final as well, Manchester City against Sheffield United. This is what Arsenal will be thinking, you know, the big game today for Manchester City. Could that take it out of them a little bit? And could it test their squad? They're still in the Champions League, of course. Arsenal don't have any of those worries.
Should we have a chat about Chelsea manager Hunt still going on?
Yeah, it is. I mean, so this is interesting. It's a bit of politics here because Julian Nagelsmann was the guy fancied to take the job next season. He's recently been dispensed with by Bayern Munich for reasons that something's gone on behind the scenes there. Chelsea were a bit concerned, I think, at the manner of his departure. They were doing their diligence on him, and Nagelsmann has kind of recognised that Chelsea have doubts about him, and so he's got his revenge in first, if you like. He's come out and said, "Oh, I don't want this. I don't want this job. I'm out of the running." My understanding is that if they could reach an agreement, they would still be able to dance ahead of next season. But he's probably looking at Chelsea himself and seeing what shambles the place is right now. £600 million. I mean, they've won 4 games in the last 22. That's relegation form, Stephen. Yeah. Chelsea going down. I mean, there are even fans I was hearing about. My brother was talking about, oh, Leeds lost the other day. That's good. Well, Leeds are down right down at the bottom. Why should that concern Chelsea? There's genuine concern, anxiety among Chelsea's fan base that they could get relegated. I don't think it will happen because they've got too many points from earlier in the season. Yeah, but there's now talk of Vincent Kompany. Yeah, well, he can win. Look, he's playing against QPR today, so that's a good sign because it means he can win the league for Burnley. But you know what? I just wonder whether Vincent Kompany might be well advised, having got Burnley back into the Premier League, to stay there just for a season or so. Having said that, when one of the big clubs comes knocking, sometimes it's like anything. A big opportunity comes along in life. You can't just say, "Well, no, I won't do it now. They'll come for me in 2 years' time." Football changes. It's so transitory in such a short period of time that sometimes that opportunity may not come along. I was talking to Alan Kirbishley one time, and he said, you know, it's taken him 12, 13 years to realise it, but he was a Charlton manager for years, doing really well. He knocked back Newcastle, and I think he really regrets it now. OK. Aidan, thank you very much indeed. Catch you a little bit later. See you this morning. Up next, we've got all the papers for you with Candice Holdsworth and the legendary David Hamilton. Diddy David, this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we
get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Now, if you want to get really, really angry this morning, have a look at this. It's in the Daily Mail, and it's a mansion. It belongs to a UK-based Russian oligarch. Now, I'm making no comments about oligarchs and all the rest of it and where the money's come from or anything else. It's just the fact he's got an £8 billion mansion. Apparently, his friends, with whom I imagine he has a lot, most of whom probably don't like him very much. But that's what you do with rich people, isn't it? You just hang about in the hope you get a bit of cash.
Or an invite to a party.
An invite to a party. It says, apparently, he likes using his cinema room and reading books. Yeah, right. What else goes on in there? So, I don't know. 8 billion... I just can't get my head around it.
No, I can't either. Apparently, the second biggest residential property in London, and it's second only to Buckingham Palace.
Better have big grounds, that's what I say. I'd want massive gardens. I'd want a forest for that.
I mean, from this bird's eye view vantage point, it doesn't look that big, does it? But from a different angle, it is absolutely palatial, as you would expect.
That pond in the middle of the drive is probably the size of an Olympic swimming pool or something. It's probably, you know, put it in perspective.
It'd have to be for that price tag, wouldn't it?
£8 billion. Is it built out of gold bricks?
Need to see an interior view, don't we?
Oh, yes, we do.
The Sun shows a picture of Prince Harry on their front page. They say he's homesick and desperate to attend the coronation next month.
See, I wonder where that's come from, because all these will they, won't they, will they, won't they, and now it's all he's desperate to come.
Well, according to royal sources, he's been desperate to get hold of the king to have a chat about the plans for the coronation. But the king has been so busy, they've only had time for one conversation. But Harry is desperately trying to get
if he's desperate to go, I bet he's in trouble at home with the missus.
Do you know what? This story doesn't surprise me, though, because I think you must be quite bored in LA.
Maybe.
And this is the thing that keeps you relevant. This is what you know, this is what you love, or at least loved until a few years ago.
Oh, I'll tell you what we love, and that's, of course, Queen Elizabeth. Here's a lovely picture. Look at this. One of the last pictures, it was taken not long before she died, with not all, but some of the great-grandchildren. The Sussex's kids aren't there, obviously. But it's a snap taken by the Princess of Wales. And I just think it's really nice because it's just partly because the Queen isn't grinning and, you know, she's not smiling. And she's not like an official picture. She's just like little old granny who's doesn't quite know what's going on. There's snapping away around her. And it's because it's just like the pictures we've all got at home. with our grandparents and things, isn't it? And I like that. It's just dead ordinary.
Yeah, all stood round her, gathered round the sofa, and it just makes you miss her so very much, doesn't it? It's only when you see lovely photographs like that, natural family photos, and you realise what a loss, really. She was so loved. And little Louis as well, I've got a soft spot for him. You can see him over in the right-hand side of that picture.
If you're getting your shorts out, just like David Hamilton has been doing, brace yourselves, because it might be nice and warm today, maybe even tomorrow. But we're going to have an Arctic blast. So your knees are going to freeze, and then we're going back to a heat wave. That's according to the Daily Star this morning.
We won't know whether we're coming or going.
We will not.
But we're in Britain, so what's new? We're joined now by David Hamilton, the radio legend, and writer Candice Holdsworth. Really good to see you both. David, let's start with you, shall we? A story in the Mail, a little bit different. This is the legend, Bobby Moore. His winning shirt has gone missing.
Yes, Jeff Powell, who writes for the Daily Mail, is an old pal of Bobby Moore. Some of the other papers have this story as well, but I think it was Jeff who actually got it. And the famous red shirt from the World Cup in 1966, Bobby's wife Tina had it in the attic, and mysteriously it's gone missing. And somebody is now offering it for auction for a lot of money for charity. So who has nicked Bobby's World Cup shirt?
Well, they must have got into the attic for that to happen.
Well, they must have done, because it was in the attic. Tina had it there. It's obviously worth a great deal of money.
Who's putting it up for auction? They must be able to find out.
I don't know if we know the name of the person who's got it, but obviously Tina's very upset about it, and I think I would be too.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, it's theft, isn't it?
Well, that's how it appears. I don't think we know yet, but certainly gone missing.
I mean, that needs to be in a museum, doesn't it?
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
It is a mystery. Whoever's selling it for charity, it just makes you wonder, is it a member of the family she's forgotten? She said, you can have that.
I don't know.
It's not the sort of thing you'd forget, though, is it?
No. It looks as though maybe somebody, perhaps came round for dinner and half-inched it.
Oh, no. Surely not. Surely not.
Who knows?
From that to a 1970s dinner party. The nice thing was always Black Forest Gatto.
What was that?
You must have had that a few times.
Crepe Suzette.
Oh, crepe Suzette. That's fancy.
Steak Diane.
Oh, steak Diane.
Flambéed at the table.
Oh, give over.
A vol-au-vents.
What about... Oh, vol-au-vents, yeah.
Oh, vol-au-vents.
Vol-au-vents. What about a prawn cocktail, Candice?
Yeah, so this is page 3 of The Sun. Apparently, prawn cocktails are back in fashion now for dinner parties. So TK Maxx did a survey of what people are cooking in their homes, and the prawn cocktails made a comeback, which is so interesting. No. So we have 1970s-style inflation and 1970s-style starters. Maybe we'll have polyester back soon as well.
Can I say that, as far as I'm concerned, it never went away. I love prawn cocktails.
Do you have, like, those dishes and a bit of salad and a bit of Thousand Islands?
And Mary Rose sauce that you have with it, and a little bit of bread and butter as well. I still...
I feel like it's moving off the
I know
menu.
you're all laughing. I know I'm an old-fashioned boy, but if I go out and I have a starter, I will always have a prawn cocktail.
Can you still get it in restaurants and things, then? I used to, because I don't eat meat or fish, and I've got a real aversion to fish. I can't bear the smell or anything. And it used to drive me mad when there was always a little do. You'd be having a do round our house, and there was a prawn cocktail, and there was always prawns in vol-au-vents and all the fish blooming everywhere. It used to drive me mad.
Nothing for you.
No. I used to have to have a cheese and onion vol-au-vent.
Well, they're nice.
And that was
and
it.
Chicken ones are nice as well.
I like cheese, but I don't like onion. That's funny, isn't it?
Oh, what?
We're all funny, aren't we?
You're extraordinary, David.
Yeah, I know.
But they've never been off the menu.
Cheese and chutney for me.
Oh, that's
cheese
nice.
And chutney.
Like a ploughman's or something.
Ploughman's,
yeah.
Oh, delicious.
Oh, that's old school as well.
Yeah, that is old school.
You two are getting really hungry now, aren't you?
This is what we do. If there's any opportunity, we get onto food.
Yeah, we do.
But unfortunately, we're not going to stay on that theme. We're going to go to something else entirely. It might make some people ill, actually. The opposite of hungry. Anyway, that's a bit of a reach, isn't it? Let's stop. Telegraph. This is 2 have been jailed over Dartford Bridge protest.
Yes, 2 people have been jailed. One has been given 3 years and the other has been given 2 years for the protest at the Dartford Bridge crossing. And the Telegraph is saying, and other people are saying too, that about time. And this is the only thing that will deter people from doing this and from making the rest of our lives a misery.
Do you think it's a bit harsh, Candice? I mean, long sentences.
There is, but I think there does need to be a deterrent for this sort of behaviour. I think it's where they really inconvenience people, and there do need to be boundaries. Legitimate protest, absolutely, but with everything, there's always a boundary. I'm all for freedom of protest, but I don't think that you should do really dangerous things.
Interesting. Well, I have to say, every view we've had, we've been talking about it all morning, every single person who's emailed in is with you both on that one.
Yeah, and I think they want to leave the London Marathon alone this weekend.
Yeah.
Because those people are running for charity. They will get no sympathy if anybody disrupts that. And also, these people have been training for a long time and take it very, very seriously. So I think any protest there needs to be wisely low-key. Don't interfere with the runners.
And if they're talking about this new campaign, this new style of campaigning, Candice, you were talking about it in the last newspaper review, they want to be peaceful and non-disruptive. They might want to heed your advice there, David.
Yeah.
Talking about the London Marathon this weekend.
But let's look at the Telegraph. And the boss of a company is quitting. That wouldn't normally make a headline. It doesn't, because it's the boss of a company that grows meat.
Yes. There's this new innovation in lab-grown meat. The chief executive of Ivy Farm Tech, Richard Dillon, he has said that he might quit the UK to move to the US because the food regulations are a little bit looser there when it comes to this particular technology, lab-grown meat.
That's what you want, looser regulations when you're growing meat.
Yes, so it's meant to be cruelty-free meat. So it's grown out of cells in the lab rather than slaughtering animals. I think all the big money is in the US. Here in Europe, there's a bit more suspicion around it. I think Italy's banned it totally. They think it's going to impact the food culture there. Personally, I think it's quite a good development. If I could eat cruelty-free meat, I'd be much happier.
Yeah, but it's a bit like the GM-modified soya, isn't it? It's like, what has this actually got in it?
Yes, I think
that could affect our DNA, our genetics,
I mean, from what I've heard, I mean, it's absolutely fine. It's just animal cells, just grown and cultured in a way that it resembles meat. It tastes like meat. It's exactly like meat. It is meat. I don't know if there's anything that can alter our DNA in it, as far as I know. I mean, I think people are inherently suspicious of things like that because it is so new and it is food, and food is so important to our well-being that people are conservative when it comes to it. But from what I've read about it, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't affect people's health at all.
Would you fancy a grown steak, Diane, after your prawn cocktail, David?
I could give it a go, I suppose.
Would you?
Yeah.
Shouldn't turn your stomach a bit?
Wouldn't be quite the same, would it? No. You see, unlike you, I'm a meat eater, and I rather enjoy my meat.
Would you eat meat
No.
that's cruelty-free and
No.
grown in a lab?
No. No.
Why sceptical about what's in it?
No, it's not because I'm sceptical what's in it, but I don't want to eat... I'm not meat is murder. I'm not one of them, but I haven't eaten meat or animal fats or gelatin or anything like that for 45 years. So why would I start now?
Do you ever get bored? I mean...
No!
I know people have a vegetarian diet, and I've tried it, but after a while I got a bit bored with it.
No, it's all right. You can mix it all up. It's like anything else. It's anything else. But I just think people should eat what you want. If you want to eat grown meat or if you want to eat freshly slaughtered meat, help yourself. I don't have an issue with any of it.
Only so many nut cutlets you can have.
Oh, yeah. It's not the 1970s now, David. You see, that's gone. Nut cutlets have gone.
Oh, you've moved on from that?
Thank heavens,
well done.
Yeah, so it's not so bad now.
David, should we have a look at the Express now? And
Yes.
Strictly judges the latest bunch to get a pay increase.
Yes, apparently the Strictly judges are up for a pay increase. I found this very interesting. BBC being very generous with their money once again.
Our money.
And apparently Shirley Ballas, who is the head judge, she gets $500,000 a year.
What?
Whereas Craig and Oti are on about $200,000. So how come they're all doing the same job? Why is she getting 500? I mean, to me, the strongest star is Craig. I think he's got tremendous charisma, and I think he's the biggest star. So if I were him, I think I might have the hump if I was on 200 grand. Might you? Chance would be a fine thing. And Shirley was on 500, and they want more.
And they want more.
They want more.
So that's before the pay rise.
Yeah, and by the way, the dancers are paid only a fraction of that, and they're the ones who do all the hard work.
But so these judges probably have about 2 minutes of airtime each, don't they?
Yeah.
Saturday night.
But they don't do that much. I mean, it's not exactly hard
Got the
work.
week off, haven't they?
Sitting behind a desk, and the people who are doing...
Aye. It can be very hard work sitting behind a desk, David. Don't knock it.
It can be Depending on the people you're on with, it could be quite tiresome, I'm sure.
I'm sure they're worth every penny. Every 500 grand is a lot of money for that job.
Why would they pay that? I mean, they're not going to go somewhere else, are they? Well, they might, but, you know, what does it matter?
I don't know. I'd never heard of Shirley Ballas till she started doing that. She's... Anyway.
Incredible.
There you go.
Good money if you can get it.
Yeah, you'd do it for that, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, good work if you can get it, eh?
Half the price. There you go. We should take over the panel. 7!
We'd be a lot cheaper, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Lovely
Laugh
stuff.
as well.
David, Candice, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you very much.
David was just saying about the London Marathon, doesn't want it disrupted. One person who won't want it disrupted is Emma Bishop. She was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer last year after thinking she just had a chest infection.
Well, remarkably, this year, the mum of 2 is running the London Marathon to raise money for the hospital that helped treat her.
And with just 24 hours to go before that huge challenge, she joins us now. It's great to see you this morning. Are you nervous?
I am so nervous. I'm like shaking in my boots. I would say something probably a little bit stronger than that, but I'm on TV, so I shouldn't. But I'm really nervous, and I'm excited and nervous about it. I've never done anything like this before, so it's a very new thing.
Oh, Emma, your story is absolutely incredible. I mean, diagnosed with lung cancer and now running the London Marathon. What is inspiring you to do this tomorrow?
There are a number of things. I mean, firstly, I never thought that I would be well enough. And when I started my treatment at the Royal Marsden under Professor Sanjay Poppet, who is a superhero, and he told me that I would be well for a period of time at least, I didn't really believe him. So I kind of did it as a challenge. Well, OK, fine. If I'm going to be well enough, I'm going to do it. And then secondly, I realised that the Royal Marsden Hospital, because my cancer is incurable, it's going to be my second home for the rest of my life. And I need to give back, and I need to say thank you, and I need to look after that home and the people that work in there and look after us every single day. They fight for us all every day. So that was probably the main reason, and to fundraise for them. And then the work that they do behind the scenes with research and clinical trials and sort of working on earlier diagnosis is extraordinary. And there is an incredible future, really, if we put the work in now to be able to save many more people and find better treatments that people can live happily whilst taking. You know, maybe cancer can be a chronic disease rather than something quite so terrifying. You know, we can say, OK, that's fine, I've got this, and I'll take this pill every day, and that's OK. I want to do what I can.
You seem very positive. You're very up for this very big challenge. But what is your prognosis?
I mean, it's incurable. Have I asked how long I have? No. And Professor Poppet we never talk about it, simply because it's really unknown. It really depends on how long this treatment will hold or keep the cancer asleep for, whether there are new ones coming along, which Prof tells me there are. He also tells me he's got tricks up his sleeve, and I tell him, well, I'm going to hold you to that. No pressure there. It's difficult because I live in the unknown, definitely. But I have hope that there is a future, and the more we do, the more options there will be. And to be honest, I'm lucky in some ways that there are treatments for my cancer, and lung cancer is progressing really. Treatment is progressing so quickly, and there are other cancers that are really kind of in the dark ages still, and so much more needs to be done. And so, whilst it's difficult for me because it's very unknown and I'm not necessarily fighting to win, which is quite difficult. I'd find that easier probably. I've had to learn to accept that I'm living with it, and it's just a part of my life. And so that's sort of something that's a new concept, I guess. But there are people that are in the trenches from the beginning, and they might still not have hope at the end of that. And it's grueling and it's hard. And at the moment, okay, there are side effects of my treatment, but I'm managing them here and there. You know, I feel tired, and I have weird spots and eczema, and although I've always had that anyway, and so, you know, I get a third eye on my forehead occasionally, and but I have to deal with that, and the tiredness I've kind of got got used to. So, I mean, I feel better now than I did a year ago, put it that way. So, this is better than having cancer that's throughout my body. So, and fingers crossed there's more. And I just want to do more. I think there's an incredible future for cancer treatment if we can really, really do what we can to support it.
Emma, you are absolutely incredible. I'm really moved hearing you speak. I mean, you're just so inspirational. Most people would want to rest now, but you are trying to get back to the hospital that has helped you so very much. How can people donate to you, people watching, listening, who are moved by your story?
Well, I have a fundraising link on Enthuse, but you can find me on my Instagram page, which is at emsbishop, EMS Bishop. The fundraising link is in my bio, and I mean, really, it's not for me, and this is, I've said this all the way along, that it's not for me. It's not. Don't think about a stranger. Don't think about me. Think about yourselves. Think about the future, because it is 1 in 2. Cancer, it could affect 1 in 2 of us, and so we have to do what we can to change that for the future, and that's really possible. So donate to do what you can to help yourselves, really.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it. And I tell you what, though, a positive attitude is hopefully good for you and your loved ones, and it'll be good for people who are going through the same thing as well to hear you. Emma, really good to talk to you. Best of luck tomorrow. We'll be thinking of you.
Thank you, I need it.
Come back to us. We'd love to have you in the studio when you're done, and you can tell us about your race and how you got along. But best of luck.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and good luck to all the runners as well. I look forward to spending the day with you and sharing it. It's going to be wonderful.
It's going to be quite an experience. Thank you. Up next, we're going to bring you all the very latest on the Raab investigation and resignation. This is Breakfast on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News, we're starting the conversation and having the debate that the establishment won't have. No one will be cancelled. Join me at 4 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. We'll be discussing all the big topics of the weekend.
Oh, get cracking!
Always honest, always fun. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Saturday the 22nd of April. Today, Raab's retribution. Oliver Dowden and Alex Chalk have come in to take over his old jobs, but will he have his revenge on the civil service? Ukraine will join the NATO family, but only when the war is over. But is that still just a red rag to the Russian bear?
Are petrol pump problems on the horizon? The price of fuel jumped up yesterday for the first time in 6 months. And signed, sealed, delivered. Royal Mail rubber stamps a deal to end the postal strikes.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Loads of you getting in touch on the Royal Mail strike that has gone to members now. And I've said this all along. I think there's something slightly different about how we view the Royal Mail and our posties, because it's part of our everyday lives. I think it's just strange, isn't it, that we just really seem to take to them in a strange way. But I've also said the CWU, and we talked to Andy Fury, the deputy leader, today. Whenever we talk to them, they have a different approach to some of the other union leaders. Is that just me? Do you think it? Did you see that interview? Do you think it too? They just seem somehow a bit more reasonable. Richard's been in touch, saying the postal workers will now get a share of the profits as part of their deal. Should the Royal Mail make a loss, will the postal workers also take a share of that? Well, no, but they will. You know, it's 20. They'll get the first sort of 20% split between them. It's not going to be a huge amount of money in their pockets each.
Yeah, the deal is at 6% this year and 2% going forward,
Yeah.
and a £500 lump sum. So it's not the 10, 15, 35% we're seeing from some other unions,
No.
their requests. Ollie says, I totally agree. Without my postie Davy, I would still be lying on my driveway with a fractured femur. Wonderful chap all year round, very caring. I'm pleased that they're getting something, even if it's not exactly what they deserve. So Ollie says they actually deserve more.
Yeah, Sian says our posties deserve a pay rise. They all go out, sun, heat, wind and rain to serve us. Bless them. Did ask, actually, why do they always go out in the rain in shorts? Have you noticed that?
That is so
She's got shorts on when it's chucking it down. And apparently it's because there's nothing worse. You'd rather have wet legs than wet trousers.
That's true.
And so that's the way, and it all dries off faster.
You wouldn't want to be soggy in your postal van, would you?
Yeah. Not everyone's happy, though. Hi Paula, says, we have a useless delivery service. My mail is regularly put through the wrong door, and almost every week I have someone else's mail delivered to me.
Ah.
You need to catch your postie and have a word, nicely.
Make friends with them.
Yeah.
They will look after you, as Stephen was saying earlier. And Paul says, does anybody use the Royal Mail anymore?
Well, yeah.
Paul, let me tell you from personal experience, honestly, my house looks like postal office most of the time.
Does
all
it?
my
Do you get
deliveries,
loads?
all my returns. Yeah, it's very busy in there.
Oh, I see. I get lots of letters every day.
Do you?
Yeah.
From the fans?
The fans, no. Some of the people know where I live. You think I'm mad? No, do you see about bills mainly? But,
no, we can't have that.
Anyway, your thoughts on posties and do you think, so if you are a postie, are you going to accept this deal? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Point, isn't it? Well,
that is the thing.
Accept it. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, Dominic Raab has warned that we The public will pay the price after he claims he was forced to resign. So, was the now former Deputy Prime Minister rightly sent packing?
Well, Mr Raab claims he was driven from office by activist, passive-aggressive civil servants. But this is despite the recent report into his behaviour concluding that he acted in an intimidating way with persistently aggressive conduct.
Well, our political reporter Olivia Utley sat down with Dominic Raab just after his resignation.
So thank you so much, Mr Raab, for coming to talk to us today. And of course, it's been quite a day for all of us, most particularly you. Can I first ask, how do you define a bully?
I don't think it is for me to define it, but look, I'm very confident that I didn't behave in a bullying way. Most of these allegations were dismissed out of hand. And I think people watching this would be surprised that in scrutinising civil servants, in making sure that millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is not squandered, being able to pull very senior civil servants, not junior members of staff, up and say, look, I don't have the basic information to decide this. That was one of the things on which I was found to have been bullying because I defended someone, or because I said in relation to human rights reform, to get more foreign national offenders removed from this country, to strengthen free speech, I said I thought the department were being obstructive. If these kind of things amount to bullying, then I think it puts a handbrake, a paralysing effect on ministers delivering for the British people, and that can't be right.
Do you think, essentially, that the allegations were purely political, or do you think people genuinely felt threatened by you?
That's difficult to say, but the way my behaviour was characterised is interesting. Adam Tolley KC, very experienced barrister who conducted this investigation, found I'd never lost my temper, never over 4.5 years shouted or swore at anyone, but that some people found my direct style of probing, of interrogating, of scrutiny, unsettling or discomforting or even offensive. And I think there's a certain tyranny of subjective hurt feelings here, which, if you actually apply that across the board, means that senior ministers are at risk as they try and drive forward the change that the British public expect, try and protect taxpayers' money, try and deliver for the British people, can actually hold things back. I think if you look at that across the board, and particularly if you compare it to other walks of life, stressful jobs, high-powered businesses, but other walks of life more generally, I think people would be pretty surprised. The risk, of course, is that it leads government, ministers, politicians to look and feel to the public even more detached from reality.
You talk about a tyranny of hurt feelings, but do you think it might go even further than that? Do you think that perhaps civil servants coordinated a campaign to remove you, a political campaign?
Well, there was certainly some coordination. One of the complaints was struck out because they'd written it together. Look, put it this way. These claims, some of them were 4.5 years old. Another one was 2.5 years old. The vast majority were 8 months old. They were all submitted on the same day, which is the 15th of November. I think a few came just a little bit later. That can't be coincidental. But I only know what I know. And I also know that I was warned by a very senior member of the government, a senior civil servant, that there are increasingly activist civil servants mobilised by the FDA union who are looking to target ministers. But all I know is that I think the bar has been so lowered now that the government we've got, and I'm a huge fan and supporter of the Prime Minister, is going to struggle to drive forward the changes we need. There'll be a chilling effect, a paralysing effect on ministers. I'm already, my phone is lit up by ministers now very concerned that they could be accused of these things for behaviour that in most walks of life would be regarded as important managerial scrutiny. And I think that must be wrong.
Well, let's talk to our political reporter, Catherine Forster, who's here in the studio. He's come out fighting.
He really has, hasn't he? I mean, the Prime Minister's letter to him was very effusive, praising him, saying how saddened he was. But Dominic Raab's letter resigning, he was clearly very, very angry. He then wrote the excoriating piece in The Telegraph. He's given television interviews subsequently talking about activist civil servants, talking about the subjective tyranny, so the tyranny of subjective hurt feelings. And many people watching will think, many Tory MPs, think that he's been got rid of or forced to resign unfairly. Now, clearly, he is a very tough boss. That's known across Whitehall. But on the other hand, it's obvious that he felt he had to go because he'd said if complaints were upheld, he would. The Prime Minister said that was the right decision. And looking at the ministerial code, clearly he did breach it twice. The ministerial code describes bullying as offensive, intimidating, etc., 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 involving an abuse of power. And he was found to have intimidated officials and abused his power.
But the report also says he didn't target sort of individuals for sort of subjected abuse, if you like. Now that's bullying, isn't it? When a bully targets a victim.
Well, the thing is that bullying, I think, what constitutes bullying is a very, very grey area. Some people say that for it to be bullying, it's got to be deliberate. But the Prime Minister took the judgment that it was irrelevant whether Dominic Raab meant to intimidate these people. The fact that they felt intimidated was enough. Now, Dominic Raab criticised that, feels that that's not fair, also feels it's very unfair that some of these complaints go back several years but were only made fairly quickly together last October, November.
So that's the coordination he's talking about.
That's the coordination. And the Prime Minister has said that he's getting Simon Case to look into procedures and processes and the way that complaints are dealt with going forward within the civil service. Because as Dominic Raab says, if you were in a private company for, an employment tribunal, if you were going to make a complaint about bullying, you would have to do that within a 3-month window. Some of these complaints go back a very long time. So it has raised real issues. But of course, number 10 will be really, really hoping that the conversation moves on from this. And what they don't want is to feel that there is a sort of bad blood with the civil service, because, of course, the government is going to rely very heavily on the civil service to get many of its policies implemented.
And could there be bad blood now, Catherine? Because Dominic Raab, talking about the passive-aggressive culture of civil servants, he's even claimed in some interviews last night that they're trying to block government policy. He touched on Brexit. How much truth do you think is in that? Because the FDA union, who represents civil servants, has said that's a dangerous conspiracy theory. Are we seeing an increasing divide between civil servants and ministers?
Well, Dominic Raab did say he was a big fan of the civil service, and he also said that most of them were fantastic. But clearly there are some people in the civil service that were very opposed to Brexit. The Daily Telegraph leads on the story about one of the complaints that was upheld was specifically about the British ambassador to Spain regarding Gibraltar, regarding Spanish boots potentially being put on the ground. Dominic Raab found out about that, thought it was unacceptable, and had that official taken out of the talks. Now, of course, we don't know the officials' side of that, but clearly there are people that feel that the civil service is largely anti-Brexit and were not happy about some of these things that they were being asked to do. The same could be said, of course, of Priti Patel. She was also found guilty of bullying under Boris Johnson. Now, Boris Johnson chose to keep her, and the ethics advisor at that point resigned. But again, some people were saying, well, this is because civil servants are being asked to do things that they fundamentally don't want to do. So certainly questions
job, isn't it?
will be being asked. Well, it certainly is their job. And, the vast majority of them will get on with it. But of course, there's also now major unhappiness amongst the civil servants who feel that this has been handled very badly because, Dominic Raab came out with his quite combative resignation letter, then came out with a piece in the Telegraph before the report was published, before everybody had the chance to sort of digest it. But of course, the report does say he didn't shout, he didn't swear. It wasn't as damning as many people would have expected. Most of the complaints were dismissed.
You see, this is where I wonder what impact this is actually going to have in terms of public perception, and the idea it could have been a disaster for the Tories, right? I wonder if people take their political party blinkers off, how many people who support all sorts of parties would look at this and go, well, this doesn't seem very fair. You know, so as one of our guests earlier on said, it's very rare that someone has to resign in this way and that their sort of popularity goes up.
Yes, I mean, there'll be plenty of people that think that he shouldn't have had to go, but by the same token, I think the Prime Minister was in a very difficult position. If he'd hung on, if Rishi Sunak had said, I don't think this is sufficient for him to go, then there would have been lots of people saying, this is another example of standards being overridden. The Tories don't care about standards. Look what happened with Owen Paterson. Look what happened with Chris Pincher. Look what happened with Partygate. And so Rishi Sunak had stood outside Downing Street, as we say again and again, talked about transparency, integrity, accountability.
Rocking a hard place.
And so, really, did he have any choice?
And what will the impact be on Rishi Sunak? Because, of course, Labour have come out fighting, and Keir Starmer says there's two questions. First of all, why was he so weak to appoint him in the first place, considering there were allegations of bullying that had gone years previously? And the second question, why didn't he just sack him once that report was on his desk? Why did Dominic Raab have to resign?
Well, I think he clearly didn't want to have to sack him because Dominic Raab was a key ally of Rishi Sunak in both leadership campaigns. Even when it was clear that Liz Truss was going to get it, he stood by Rishi Sunak very clearly. He actually said that Liz Truss's economic policies would be like a suicide note. So, of course, she came in and abruptly sacked him. So the Prime Minister feels a huge debt of loyalty to him and really didn't want to see him go, but at the same time felt that there were clearly two breaches of the code, according to Adam Tolley, and therefore he had to go. But, you know, also there'll be lots of people just thinking, who are not interested in intricacies of this story, just thinking, Dominic Raab, bullying, get rid of him, move on. Why are we talking about this? Why are we not talking about the cost of living and all the things that are really impacting on people's lives? So, you know, a lot of people will be just thinking this is yet another distraction of the Tories fighting amongst themselves when they should be looking at other issues.
OK. Catherine, thanks very much indeed. Well, we're joined now by the Shadow Health Minister, Andrew Gwynn. Very good to see you this morning. This is interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people are reading this. I mean, not all, but a lot reading this, saying, well, look, he may not have been the best boss in the world. He may lack a few sort of people skills, if you like. But even looking at the details of the report, it doesn't really seem like bullying.
Well, look, there has been an investigation into it and 2 cases have been found. And I'm not going to double down on the whistleblowers. If people feel that they have been treated badly in the workplace, then they have absolutely got the right to complain. And there have been allegations of...
Forgive me, though. There's a difference between being treated badly in the workplace and bullying, isn't there?
There is, but there is a fine line here. And if you feel that you have been treated badly, if you feel that your people further up the feeding chain, whether that's your line manager or whether it's a minister of the Crown, has belittled you, has bullied you, you have the right to call that out. And that's what these people have done. And I'm not going to double down on people who feel that they have been treated badly and have rightly blown the whistle. There have been allegations of bullying permeating the corridors of power about Dominic Raab, not just in his most recent department, but in previous departments. And that's been going on for quite some time now. So, I mean, firstly, it does beg the question why the Prime Minister, who will have known about these allegations, they weren't a secret, sought to appoint him to the second most senior position in government as Deputy Prime Minister. But also why he didn't sack Dominic Raab on receiving this report, why he allowed Dominic Raab to leave on his own terms, and worst of all, doubling down on the whistleblowers, on the victims. I think that letter that Dominic Raab produced in his resignation was quite frankly appalling and showed no humility and no contrition and no reflection on what others perceive to be bad behaviour on his part.
I mean, most of those bullying claims were dismissed. 6 of them were dismissed. Most of the serious ones were, which is the shouting, the screaming, the throwing things. What was upheld was that he went further when necessary or appropriate when delivering feedback, and that he is abrasive. That's what was upheld in this report. What Dominic Raab says is that this is a passive-aggressive culture of civil servants. Would you agree with that?
Well, look, I've only ever witnessed sheer professionalism from civil servants, and I think we pride ourselves, rightly in the United Kingdom, that we have a permanent, non-political civil service that serves governments of all colours, irrespective of the party in power. So we will have some excellent civil servants that served under the Labour governments of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, went on to serve the coalition government of David Cameron and Nick Clegg, went on to serve the Conservative majority governments of David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, very briefly Liz Truss, and now Rishi Sunak, and do so professionally. Where I accept ministers have the right to expect correct information, the information that they've asked for, the level of detail that they need to be able to do their jobs correctly, to make decisions, serious decisions in government, and to answer correctly questions in Parliament. If they feel that they're not getting that, the correct way to do it isn't to be abrasive, isn't to shout, isn't to scream, isn't to belittle. It's to raise with the permanent secretary, who is the line manager of the civil servants in a particular department, that they don't feel a member of their staff is performing correctly. That's the correct management procedure, and that's where Dominic Raab has fallen short.
I have to say, one of the incidents where he has fallen short was the way he handled the situation regarding Gibraltar, where it was someone had appeared to overstep the mark and said to the Spanish that Spanish soldiers could be posted permanently across the border in Gibraltar. Now, look, I know Gibraltar very well, and it is not a right-wing government in Gibraltar at the moment, but you can imagine there'd be more than screaming if that had happened in Gibraltar. They must have been applauding what Dominic Raab did.
Look, I'm a good friend of Gibraltar too, and Gibraltar has a Labour government, which I'm incredibly proud of. But where a civil servant has overstepped the mark, it is not the job of the Secretary of State to scream and shout, yes, make your views known, but it's the job... But with respect, it is the job of the permanent secretary to discipline members of staff that have overstepped the mark. It is not the job of the Secretary of State.
Claims he was screaming and shouting were dismissed.
It is not the job of the Secretary of State to make a member of staff feel that they've been bullied. And, whether they've been dismissed or not, actually, Dominic Raab needs to reflect on his own management style, perhaps, because if people perceive that they've been bullied, there's clearly an issue there. And some of the complaints of bullying have been upheld, some haven't. But nevertheless, a period of reflection on Dominic Raab's part is probably what is better than doubling down on people who are victims or perceived themselves to be victims of his behaviour.
Well, that's interesting, though, isn't it? Perception of being a victim. I mean, Dominic Raab's talked about a tyranny of hurt feelings. And look, nobody wants anyone to be upset, but this is a serious place of work and a very serious business. And nothing more serious to the people of Gibraltar than having Spanish boots on the ground there. You can imagine how that would go down. We can't allow all these things to be run. We can't allow all these things to be run by hurt feelings, can we?
To criticise that. However, it's the manner by which you do it. And if there is a disciplinary matter, you bring that up with the civil servant's boss, and that's the permanent secretary. There's a correct way of doing it, and there's an incorrect way of doing it. And if somebody feels that they've been bullied, then actually you've got a duty to reflect on your own behaviour, even if you think you've done the right thing, because clearly there are people who have blown the whistle. And, you know, if somebody blew the whistle on my own behaviour, I would want to reflect on why they'd done that.
Let's turn to the NHS now, shall we? Because the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, he said he's pursuing legal action over the lawfulness of the next strikes by the nurses in England. That's because he says their mandate runs out on the 1st of May. Therefore, the strikes at the beginning of May are unlawful. I'm wondering, would Labour do the same thing? Would you take the nurses to court over those strike days, or would you allow that disruption to continue? Tens of thousands of appointments being cancelled.
Look, nobody wants to see these strikes in the National Health Service, and it's really because the government waited until the 11th hour before they sat down with the health professionals to discuss some very valid and reasonable concerns that they have. You know, our nurses don't go on strike for no reason. They were the heroes of the pandemic. They pulled out all the stops, but they feel overwhelmed, they feel overworked. There is a workforce crisis in the NHS that the government has known about for a long time. It predates the pandemic. The pandemic just piled even more pressure on the National Health Service. And we've known for a long period of time that there were issues, long-term issues, that needed to be fixed. So the fact that we are still in a protracted period of conflict between the health professionals and the Secretary of State and the government is a failure of the government. What we would do, we've already said, we would tackle some of those long-term issues. We need to sort out the workforce for the future of the NHS so that we can relieve the pressure, not just on the staffing problems in the NHS that we are seeing at the moment, but we can cut the waiting times and the waiting lists, and we can get patient care back to where it needs to be. Those are the fundamental issues here. I don't want to see any strike, but I'm not sure that ratcheting up the conflict between the government and the health professionals is the right way to go about it. I would sooner see Steve Barclay's efforts being to speak to the health unions about their concerns and to look at what more can be done. It's not just about pay, it's about terms and conditions, it's about those long-term workforce challenges as well, how we recruit the next generation of doctors, nurses and healthcare workers to supplement the ones that we already have and to ease the pressure on the NHS.
Drew Gwynn, it's good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, let us know what you make of any of the topics that we touched upon there with Andrew Gwynn. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
It's interesting. And that Gibraltar issue, I think, is really important. If you're not familiar with Gibraltar, if you've not been to Gibraltar, it's the most British place that you will ever go to. It's more British than Britain. And the idea of having, you see, that whole thing about having boots, Spanish boots on the ground there, with the outrage. And it's interesting, and Fabian Picardo, who I know, who is the chief minister, and it is a Labour government in Gibraltar, but that government has come out and had some very kind words to say about Dominic Raab following his resignation.
Interesting.
It is interesting. It is. It's just an interesting... I just think that's one issue where you can imagine, if you understand how the people of Gibraltar feel, that you would be absolutely blooming furious at the idea that someone said, oh, you could station Spanish troops just across the border. Be like, there'd be uproar. There'd be uproar if that happened. I mean, it was just terrible. So, I don't know. It's just an interesting aspect of all of this.
Different perspective, isn't it?
It's all about seeing things from different perspectives.
And something like that, they're very grateful for an experienced minister in lots of different departments. And that's one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak wanted to keep him on side, didn't want him to go. I'm sure lots of people will be feeling that way. Perhaps you don't feel that way. Let us know what you think.
Will this, as Dominic Raab says, paralyse ministers in delivering for the British people if they're then worried about upsetting civil servants? Bullying, no one's saying bullying is acceptable. Are you going to upset some people along the way? Probably. I've probably upset people in my career. Don't want to upset...
I can't imagine that.
No, I think I have. I don't want to upset anybody. I certainly haven't bullied anyone. I wouldn't want to upset anybody either. But I'm sure it's happened. I
doubt it.
No, it has. But it's... I'm telling you it has. But it's that line, isn't it? And this certainly seems to have been a pretty fine line. I don't know. But that's why we're just here commentating and not politicians. You can have your say, gbviews@gbnews.com. It'd be better if we ran the world, wouldn't it?
It would, wouldn't it? We could do that. Like to be paid the Strictly judges' salaries as well. That'd be nice.
£500,000 to be a judge on Strictly if you're Shirley Ballas.
I'd do it. Do it for that money. I think most of you would.
Do it for half that.
Would be a cheap get, wouldn't we?
Blimey, that, can you imagine? They have two for the price of one.
Well, from dancing to the world of sport.
Got nothing better to do on a Saturday night.
We could do that, couldn't we? Well, Aidan McGee is here shortly with everything you need to know from the world of sport.
Pull your knees in a bit. What are we saying? Pull your knees in a bit tighter.
This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion. looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
"9:34. This is breakfast on GB News with Mina. Morning to you.
The cat's mother.
The cat's mother, yes. Ada McGee is here. Morning.
Morning to you.
Morning. Yeah, what have we got?
Well, last night, I think it was just over about 25 hours ago, I sat in this very chair and said, look, don't expect...
Told lies.
I did, basically, yeah. Not deliberately.
No.
I was expecting just a read-through. I thought Arsenal, after all the two games they've had recently, the 2-2 draw at Liverpool, the 2-2 draw at West Ham, it's an easy one. It's a home banker against Southampton, bottom of the league. But Southampton just turned up and, they're fighting for their lives. And the point situation means that a win last night could have put them within touch of the teams that are in above that perforated line of the bottom three. And they produced a performance from the gods, and they were 2-0 up within 14 minutes. We know Arsenal have a propensity to concede early goals. It was 9 seconds against Bournemouth a month ago. This one was inside a minute as well, and they were 2-0 down with Theo Walker got the second after 14 minutes. They were 3-1 down as well in the second half, and then they pulled it back with the last couple of minutes. But it was a hell of a game. Southampton had injury problems during the match as well. It was a minor Premier League classic, I would describe it as, but has echoes of 1989 here, because this is a young Arsenal side. They were the two youngest teams in the Premier League last night. You wouldn't have known it. It was a performance of great maturity by both sides. As I say, echoes of 89. Back then, a very young Arsenal side led the way all the way throughout the season. George Graham was the manager. They had to go to Anfield on the last day and win by 2 clear goals. Nobody gave them a chance, and they pulled it off, and it's still probably one of the greatest, the most dramatic title races ever. Now, this is slightly different because they're not right at the end of the season, but nonetheless, Arsenal have to travel to Manchester City on Wednesday night. They've got to win that game now. Jamie Carragher even thinks that they're going to need something miraculous to win the title now. So 2 dropped points yesterday, but they might just take some momentum from the fact that they rescued a draw from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah, but you see, what I'm focused on is the fact it was a major cock-up by you yesterday.
Well, I mean...
saying it was, it was just going to be an ordinary match, and, frankly, you need to pull your socks up and you need to do better. And
I've got any socks on today.
And I just wonder if you're going to try and do me for bullying. Well, saying that in a robust manner to
that was going through my brain. And don't forget, you're probably going to mention the horse that I told you to back last week.
Oh, you did, yeah.
Mr.
Incredible.
Yeah, I know.
I lost 10 quid on that.
Tell you what, this is my rule, right? If I'm going to make a prediction, I'll remind you if I got it right. Other than that, you don't mention anything. Is that a deal?
Yeah, OK.
So instead of exposing me all the time.
I don't want to be a bully.
No, please don't.
I just wonder where the line is these days.
I know.
So do you have any predictions for tonight, Aidan?
Tonight? Well, we've got...
afternoon, I should say.
This afternoon, look, I think Palace will beat Everton. Everton are going to be pushed down towards the bottom 3 further, I would have thought. In fact, they could... I'm not sure they could even drop into the bottom 3 today. They travelled to Crystal Palace, who are resurgent under Roy Hodgson, 75-year-old Roy Hodgson, although he doesn't like people talking about his age very much. We've got the FA Cup semi-final today, Manchester City against Sheffield United at Wembley, and Man United tomorrow. I think City will come through that quite comfortably, although now I've said that, I think Sheffield United will probably beat them 4-0, won't they? And then we've got Man United are playing tomorrow against Brighton. I would make Brighton slight favourites for that game. First time they've met at Wembley since 1983, and it promises to be a decent game. But we could, by this time tomorrow, by within 48 hours, we could get all Manchester FA Cup final, which would be interesting.
Oh, that would be.
I went to a semi-final in 2011 between the two, which kind of marked a changing of the guard in some ways towards City. But I don't recall ever seeing an FA Cup final involving the Manchester clubs.
No. Do you know what's been playing on my mind lately? It's been running through my mind. I can't sleep with thinking about Julian Nagelsmann. Well, look, is he going to take the Chelsea job? But apparently not now.
Well, my understanding is that there were concerns from the Chelsea board as to why he left Bayern Munich recently. I think he's got in there first. He's got his revenge in first by pulling himself away from the talks. There haven't been any talks as far as I'm aware. Vincent Kompany at Burnley, who can win the title today with a win against QPR, and Mauricio Pochettino, who isn't wanted to Tottenham, so he probably won't be going back there. They're the front runners now, although they claim not to really have a short list, and Chelsea claim they weren't really considering Nagelsmann anyway. But I'm told that if the two parties begin to get around the table, there is still a deal to be done, but it remains to be seen. They need somebody. He probably looks at the chaos at Chelsea and thinks maybe it's not the right club for him.
Good job he's not a player anymore, isn't it?
Yes.
You'd have to have very broad shoulders to get your name across the back.
Most of these players, you would, yeah, exactly, on the back of the shirt.
That's
yeah.
kind of joke.
It is, yeah. But most of these top managers didn't have stellar playing careers. There's not much of a link between being a successful player and a successful manager. It's a different skill set completely.
Interesting. Well, look at Rooney.
He's done okay.
And Frank Lampard.
Frank Lampard, yeah, another one, yeah, exactly. It's quite hard for them, I think.
Very good at this.
They get frustrated because the players in their care can't probably produce what they produce as a player, and they probably find that quite frustrating.
Yeah. Should we stay with the leadership theme?
Yes.
And look at Everton? Yeah. There's a backlash over the chairman. Yeah,
Bill Kenwright, he's 77 years old. He's been not accused, but it's been felt by the fans group altogether now. They believe that maybe he's too old and maybe a little bit infirm to do the job. He's come out fighting yesterday, put a lengthy statement out on the Everton website saying that's not the case at all. The club's running reasonably well. They're aware of the situation. They're aware of the club's plight. And, of course, they could, a defeat today, push them into the bottom three. They're playing at Crystal Palace, who we know are resurgent, and they could have a difficult afternoon on their hands. But, yeah, I mean, he's been under pressure for some time. I mean, he made some quite peculiar quotes even a couple of years ago saying it was the best-run club in the country, and every other club in the Premier League, whenever they've got a problem, they think, well, what would Everton do? You know, I think he might have got that wrong. He might have been thinking, what would Everton not do?
Yeah.
So yeah, difficult times for them.
It's interesting, though, if the fans are against you...
Oh, yeah, I know.
Kenwright and co, you must go, said the banner there.
Yeah, I know, but this has been rumbling for probably 15 years. I remember covering demonstrations at Goodison Park when they were calling him Billy Liar. Yeah. They have been against him for quite some time. It wasn't quite as vehement then because they were in the top 10 in the Premier League and they had David Moyes as manager. But fast forward on, 12, 13 years, whatever it's since then, they've spent colossal amounts of money, Stephen, and they've got absolutely nowhere. And they've got lots of liabilities on the books who are earning far too much money for the calibre of player they are. And they're in a relegation battle every season. We were told at the end of last season that would be the last time it happens for quite some time. They're in exactly the same position. In fact, you could even argue they're in a more difficult position than they were under Lampard this time last year.
We're talking of vast amounts of money.
Yes, and some good news for us, Aidan.
Exactly, yeah. Well, you'll be aware of the picture appeal I did last week. It was a QPR picture, my three favourite players under the White City underground sign. I decided to auction it for the Tiger Cubs, who are a Down syndrome football team at QPR for Down syndrome sufferers and young people. They had the sponsor bought last week. They're close to their £15,000 target.
Nice.
And a very generous man you can see on the right-hand side, a fella called Stephen Begg. He bid £1,000 for that picture. That's his daughter Evie there on the right as well with the red hair. That's me on the left wearing the same outfit as I got on now. And I went to Brentwood, Essex, all the way up the A127, dropped the picture off yesterday. He's going to frame it when he moves into his new house later this year. But I just want to thank him for his generosity because that's a wonderful bid.
Well done him, £1,000.
Absolutely.
It's a great piece of artwork for a true fan.
Well, it was commissioned by myself, so what do you expect?
Well, there you go.
But it's all for a great cause.
Yes. Is that, well, they have running costs like everybody else, you know.
Of course,
I think they're up to 13,000 or 15,000, so that was a real shot in the arm, the £1,000 that Stephen donated. Lifelong QPR fan as well. Clearly a great man.
Yeah, no, it's great, and actually, there's huge amounts of benefits for these activities for youngsters. There's still too much of a view, isn't there, that people with any disability and things like Down syndrome, that they don't want to get involved in football. Of course they do.
Exactly. So it's called Tiger Feet 13. QPR have been involved with this for 13 years now, and they're very active in their community. And things are really, really tough for Queen's Park Rangers on the pitch right now, but we have some very, very big-hearted fans, that's for sure.
I love it. I think that's fantastic.
Nice.
Well
Good
done,
news,
you,
Aidan.
Well, you know.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Now, there's some sort of bad news, or more bad news, we should say, for Kevin Spacey. We'll bring you all the details of that in just a moment, because we'll be joined by the ever-glamorous Stephanie Tecci. This is Breakfast.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Doobs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9:46. This is breakfast. Good morning to you. Now here we go. On the Raab thing, Peter, hi Peter, says this is the definition of a bully. One who is habitually cruel, insulting or threatening to others who are weaker, smaller or in some way vulnerable. The key word habitual isn't mentioned in the KC's deductions. Name and shame these weak individuals who shouldn't be in the civil service. But the whole habitual thing, you can't just bully somebody once. That's just having a firm word, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's dividing you out there. David says, I feel sorry for Dominic Raab, who's bullied out of his job by a bunch of handy-pandy civil servants. What is this country coming to?
No, say what you mean, though.
Yeah, say what you mean. Don't mince your words, David.
Another Dave says, I worry these allegations of bullying will open the floodgates for all employees across the board to accuse managers of bullying. I own my own business. I've had to tell staff off for being late, not turning up, standards not being up to scratch. We'll now see if there's a load of bullying complaints.
Yeah, I mean, where is the line between having high standards and being robust and telling people what you want and bullying?
Yeah.
Where is that line? And Gilbert makes that point. He said, this issue is quite frightening. If this is accurate, he's never swore or shouted, then he didn't bully. This is a conspiracy. Everyone will be walking on eggshells when in turn allows the civil servants to frustrate the will of elected politicians.
Do you know what I think of when I think of high standards?
What do you think?
The very highest of standards. class, panache, style, charisma.
Yeah, I can see where this is going. I was about to say the Queen, but we're not
No.
far off, actually.
Stephanie Tetchy.
The Queen of showbiz.
I need to have all these affirmations, seriously, in the morning. I would love to hear all of this. Please, write a book for me. Write a poem for me, Stephen.
Oh, yeah,
I know
right.
you write poetry. Write one about the breakfast team.
Oh, all right, then. Be very short. Let's have a look at Kevin Spacey. More hot water for him.
More legal battles for Kevin Spacey. You know, over the past few years, he's had a lot of claimants who've come out, you know, saying that he sexually assaulted them. He's facing in June, it's been confirmed, from June 28th, he'll be facing a 4-week trial at Southwark Crown Court, where 4 men have said that between 2001 and 2013, he sexually assaulted them, all claims which he has denied. And during that period, it's a big chunk of period where he was the artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre. It was only last year that Kevin faced another sexual assault claim from an actor called Anthony Raab, but he lost that case. It was a 40 million case, not Kevin. Anthony did. So Kevin's pretty adamant that he's going to come out innocent in all these kind of situations and court cases.
Because that was a huge case.
It was
it's what sort of broke the back of all of this. And yet the fact that Spacey won it seems to have been lost in the mix a little bit.
Yeah, because the problem with these historic cases, they've happened, like in the case with Anthony Raab, it happened almost 20 years ago when Kevin was younger, he was younger. So it's always hard to actually bring all the evidence that you will need to kind of uphold in a court case. And, you know, most of these cases are historic. So even though they do need to be heard in a court, it's a matter of what evidence you've got to support it. But the problem with this case for Kevin, you've got 4 men who've come out. So that's maybe 4 too many. And depending what the experiences they've been through with Kevin, he seems like he's got quite an uphill battle with this one.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's all, you know, innocent until proven guilty,
Definitely,
of course,
agree.
and we'll have to see. And he's determined to fight on this one, isn't he?
He is. So. Whether he's going to have a career in Hollywood afterwards is yet to be seen, because I think in that sense it's all about reputation, and if your reputation's been marred, especially when it comes to situations of sexual assault, it's quite hard to bounce back from that.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Should we have a word on Alec Baldwin? Because you were telling us yesterday, weren't you, that criminal charges against him had been dropped.
Yeah.
But we know something about the family now, don't we?
Yeah, so, you know, it was a win for Alec Baldwin on Thursday when a US High Court said they're dropping his 2 charges of involuntary manslaughter for the death of Helena Hutchins, who, of course, was the Ukraine cinematographer who was working on the West End film with him, Rust. Alex always says that he did not pull the trigger, but FBI forensic reports say differently, because how did this woman die? So he won't face no criminal charges, but her family, her parents and her sister are going ahead with plans to sue Alec.
Now, what I don't understand about this, and I know it's America, so things are different.
Yeah.
But so it's his parents and her parents and her sister now suing.
Yeah.
He's already had a settlement and paid her husband and their son.
Yes, privately. So this was settled out of court. We don't know how much he paid him off, because the court refused to disclose the sum, because in order for protection for Helena's son. But it seems like her parents and her sister do not want to let this situation lie. And I think what's made matters worse is that he's gone back to work on the film.
It doesn't help,
and that
does
is
it?
pouring more salt in the wound.
Yeah.
Because even though Helena, you know, you can't bring her life back, it's the fact that you're still continuing with this film. The latest pictures we've seen Alec Baldwin holding another prop gun. So can you imagine how much trauma that could be triggering for the family? Yeah. But Alec feels quite confident that he's going to win this case, because he said there's no legal integrity with what they're trying to do. He doesn't feel like their case will be able to stand in a court of justice.
Oh, well, we shall see. We shall see. Talking about doing right from wrong. There you go. You've been desperate for this one.
We always want a Taylor Swift update.
We always like a bit of a Taylor chinwag.
We have a Taylor Swift update, don't we?
We do. I know it's like, not really a story, but it's a bit of gossip. Well, apparently, all of Taylor's friends, all of her celebrity friends have been unfollowing Jo on Instagram. So we don't know why.
That's the ex.
Yeah, that's the ex, Jo Alwyn, who she was with for 6 years. We don't know why they've split up because Taylor's not going to talk about it publicly, probably being a new album of hers. But at the moment...
not publicly, I just released an album about it.
That's what we love from Taylor. But there's been a lot of articles that most of her friends have started unfollowing him, which is kind of telling that he might have done something wrong to Taylor.
Well, mind you, they're just deciding which one they want to be friends with.
I know, but on Instagram you can mute people now. To unfollow is a big thing. It's making a statement.
I'm with you, Stephanie. I think he could be a guilty party.
I
I'm not by any
Oh.
means biased.
Let's not make assumptions,
I'm
ladies.
Taylor all the way. I'm Team Taylor all the way.
Oh, well, there you go. Stephanie, thank you very much indeed. Up next, we've got all the very latest on the Raab resignation and what he said to our very own Olivia Utley. That's with Esther and Phil with Saturday Morning.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The weekend will see showers and longer spells of rain across the country, though there will be some sunny spells start to turn colder, particularly across the north of the UK. The reason for the unsettled weather is low pressure is developing across the UK, and as this moves eastwards the end of Sunday into Monday, it allows a cold northerly airstream for many of us to start next week. Through into this morning, we've got some fog patches across southern England and Wales. These will quickly clear. Some brightness initially, but then further cloud and rain pushing into southern counties. Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England will have a cloudy day with outbreaks of rain, while Scotland will have the best of the sunshine once again today. Maybe a little bit cooler, but still highs of 16 or 17 Celsius here, so above average. Elsewhere, generally 12 to 14 Celsius, maybe 15 if we see any prolonged sunny spells. Into the evening time, a rather unsettled end to the day. We'll see a lot of clouds, showery outbreaks of rain swirling around across the UK. Driest conditions still holding on for western Scotland, but northern and eastern parts of Scotland turning wetter here. As a result of a lot more cloud around, it won't be quite as cold tonight. Temperatures generally 5 to 7 Celsius. But it means a fairly cloudy start to Sunday morning. Showery outbreaks of rain from the word go. Some of the rain could be heavy at times as it pushes north and eastwards. Generally cloudier, cooler picture across Scotland compared to the week just gone. And here some showers feeding in on quite a brisk northerly breeze developing. Northern Ireland also sunny spells and showers. And temperatures overall generally around, if not a little below average, starting to feel colder though across northern Scotland as that wind picks up. And that cold air spreads south through Monday into Tuesday with temperatures below average for the time of year. There will be some sunny spells on Tuesday though, ahead of further rain pushing in to the southwest on Wednesday.